economics is a more constructive international. We saw that Q4 pop in international equities. Do you sustain that?
Well, it hasn't been the case. So that obviously this year, and the U.S. markets have retaken the lead because the markets have gotten scared. But we do think in the intermediate term, so for our longer-term portfolios, we are positioned for a global growth rebound. And we would argue strongly that there is going to be a rotation back towards the kind of more cyclically geared areas. And once we get through this most recent concern around the virus, that doesn't mean, by the way, that U.S. stocks can't work. It just means that, that the really fatter pitch is in those markets outside the U.S. and in the areas that have been beaten up the most. And we're in a process now of probably making the final low so we can have that next wave of global reflation.
So, Mike, taking a look at your research, which we love to read, I see you added J&J as a name that you think the Morgan Stanley clients should be looking at. What's the story behind J&J?
Yeah, it's really simple. I mean, this is a classic, defensively oriented growth name. I mean, it doesn't grow fast, but it grows, 5, 6, 7% top line, and it's been punished because of the litigation concerns that are out there. And our analyst thinks that those concerns are overpriced. It trades in the 6th percentile on a relative valuation basis. There's obviously been concern around the healthcare industry because of the far left, wing candidates in the Democratic Party that were in the lead. That looks to be fading now to some degree, and so this is just an opportunity for a valuation catch up. And we think high quality defensive growth should continue to work, and this is a good place to put money right now.
Hey, Mike, thanks so much for that. We appreciate your thoughts as always. Mike Wilson, he is Morgan Stanley Chief U.S. Equity Strategist and Chief Investment Officer. A little Johnson & Johnson there. You don't see people taking a look at it. Healthcare is one of those sectors you're just like, boy, the political headline risk is out there, and I just would hate to get blindsided by a bad debate night from the Democratic Party.
I know BDX hammered today off of some kind of forward guidance as well, down a good 9%. Paul, explain to our audience, and the media folks is really guilty about you're either all in or all out. And yet there's all the 28 flavors of equity strategy. And I think of the giant Gina Martin Adams, who was acclaimed in the bull market for a measured, cautious approach in not being all in cash. A lot of equity strategists can be cautious, but still in the market, right?
Yeah, I think so. Particularly if you're at a place that has a big retail following. Think about, the Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, the Morgan Stanley with that Smith Barney army of brokers out there. They got to be in the market, but, you can't be all cash. But you can certainly be perhaps a little bit more defensive in your portfolio. And I think that's kind of how we're, Mike Wilson and the Morgan Stanley folks are. And, a name like Johnson & Johnson really fits that bill. It's a steady grow kind of company, dividend yield. So I think that's kind of, you don't necessarily have to go out and chase Tesla, which I know you're doing here, Tom.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how portfolio managers try to think about it when they go, quote, go defensive, Yeah,
and folks, I want to make clear here. Yeah, we're at 692 on Tesla, so I'm only down 300 points here. Great. But, folks, I want to make clear within the comedy of Bloomberg surveillance and Bloomberg on the economy, when I say, all cash, that's a joke, folks.
Yes.
And I want to make that clear. And that
especially at these interest rates.
The adults that we talk to don't have the luxury of being all cash, particularly a mutual fund by prospectus, just as one example.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we take very seriously these shades of a Jim Paulson, a Mike Wilson, whoever.
Exactly. So let's take a look at this. 9:25, 5 minutes. We're going to get that market open for you. NASDAQ up 9.5 points. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the time, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Productivity.
Listen, we know you're not here for ads, but while you're waiting for the music, cybercriminals might be waiting for you to expose your login credentials and payment information over Wi-Fi. Help keep your online activity private with Norton 360. It gives you multiple layers of protection, including secure VPN with bank-grade encryption, device security, password manager, and PC cloud backup. Go to uk.norton.com to get all-in-one protection starting at $24.99 for your first year. Terms apply. That's uk.norton.com.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Had the same job for the last 15 years? Working with the same people, in the same office, drinking tea from the same comedy mug, eating the same crayfish and rocket sandwich every lunchtime, using the same business jargon, and climbing the same greasy pole. What does that even mean? Then maybe it's time to switch it up, starting with the all-new Vauxhall Corsa. With its bold styling and up to 70 miles per gallon. To switch it up, visit your local Vauxhall dealership or search New Corsa. Official WLTP test figures for comparison purposes only. Real-world figures may vary.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney, and the opening bell brought to you by SEI. With a 50-year history of innovation, SEI's outsourced solutions help achieve lasting success for investment managers, asset owners, private banks, and independent advisors. Learn more at SEIC.com. The S&P 500 up 0.33% at the open, up 10 points at 3344. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 0.33% or 102 points to 29,392. The Nasdaq's up 0.3% or 28 points to 95.36. 10-year Treasury down 2/32, yield 1.65%. The yield on the 2-year 1.45%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.2% or 10 cents to $50.65 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.33% or $5.30 at $15.68.10 an ounce. The euro 1.0995 against the dollar. The yen is at 109.88. Tom and Paul.
We are going to do this. Karen, thank you so much. We're going to have a joy doing this. We're going to slide into a discussion on Deutsche Bank with our Steve Aarons in Frankfurt. But we're going to do it with why Deutsche Bank is moonshotted this morning, its biggest lift since time began. And we're going to do it by explaining, and this is what the joy is of working with Paul Sweeney, folks. We can talk about the fabric of some of the American institutions we deal with. Long ago and far away, the Lovelace family took over a small, sleepy shop in Los Angeles, which ended up being called Capital Group. And they ended up with a retail wing called the American Funds. But what they really were was so intimidating in their private partnership structure that when you spoke to Mr. Kirby, and trust me, Robert Kirby was Mr. Kirby, or you spoke to the younger Lovelace, your knees were shaking. And if you were a sell-side analyst and had to go out in media and actually speak to Gordon Crawford about that upstart Roberts family in Philadelphia, you went and did it. Paul, what was it like going through the door of Capital Group in L.A. to see the giant of media buy-side management?
I did that every year for about 25 years to go see Gordy Crawford because he was the number one investor in all of media. He has since retired, but Capital Group is a mutual fund company that is absolutely bottoms-up research driven,
and they bulletproof integrity.
Yeah, absolutely. And when they go into a company, when they invest in a company, they do it in size. So I'm looking at Deutsche Bank here. Stock is up a little more than 10% today, 52-week high, in part because of some news that Deutsche Bank, that Capital Group has taken a 3% stake in Deutsche Bank. So Steve Ahrens, Bloomberg News, from Deutsche Bank, from Germany. What does it really mean here for Deutsche Bank here? The stock has been so beaten down. So what does it really mean for them?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for having me on the show. The share price says it all. It's a big boost for the CEO who unveiled a very ambitious turnaround plan last year. People at first didn't believe the plan. The stock actually hit an all-time low just in August, but for some reason he's given people more faith in his plan, in his own performance, and actually unveiled pretty good numbers last week, and that has really boosted the share. And the decision by Capital Group now highlights how investors seemingly take faith in the plan and are willing to put their money on it.
It's extraordinary, and let's be sure, folks, this is not an index fund purchase like Vanguard or State Street and the others. This is an active manager going in. Is it perceived there, Steve, almost like a sovereign wealth fund purchase?
It's certainly something, as you said, this is a very, very sophisticated investor. It's an investor that will look at its targets for a long time before making that decision. We've been told they were actually here in Frankfurt on the Investor Day in December. People from Capital Group and spoke with the CEO and other people of the bank to make sure their investment would pay off. And I think that has happened. It's a very, very well thought through investment, I think.
So, Steve, what do investors believe that Deutsche Bank has to execute on first and best?
What they like, first of all, is that they've been managing through this deep restructuring without dipping too deeply into the capital cushion. So capital strength, financial strength, is better than initially expected, and that's a big positive. Trading, which is still one of Deutsche Bank's traditional strengths, was impacted less than many people had feared, and if now savings shows you can actually stem the revenue decline in other parts of the business, then we may even see more.
Right. Well, Steve, I don't want you to play sell-side analyst here and get in trouble with John Micklethwaite, but I'm going to cut to the chase. Does this preclude a Deutsche Bank cash call? That's all this comes down to. The big fear is they've had to go back to the well, to Qatar and the others to recharge the balance sheet. Is that out of the way now?
I think that's part of the reason why people are now willing to commit more money to it, because the less than expected dip in capital, regulatory capital, means it's now likely to manage through more likely than before that they will be able to manage through the restructuring without having to ask shareholders for more money.
And Steve, I guess the other issue out there is there any type of merger that might be on the horizon for Deutsche Bank?
Well, as you probably know, they went into formal talks with the other German bank, Commerzbank, last year, and that didn't go anywhere. I'm pretty sure, and Seving has said so on the record, they will never rule out any consolidation, but I think it's highly unlikely for now. But, it's pretty clear it's something that Seving would like to do once the bank's a bit stronger.
Very good. Steve Ahrens, thank you so much. Greatly appreciated from Frankfurt here as Capital Group Los Angeles dives into a significant position on Deutsche Bank. Here's another Capital Group story, Paul. You'll remember this well. The world ended as we know it in 1987.
Yep.
It was a Thursday night, whatever, and we got through the week, and Paul's barely old enough to remember this, and we came out, and then on Friday there was Louis Rukeyser to get us through it, and he did it with Mr. Schreier of Merrill Lynch, with a gentleman that I knew quite well, John Templeton. I was so honored to know him at a young age as well. And sliding in from Los Angeles was Robert Kirby. And the three of them with Lou Rukeyser on Wall Street Week single-handedly on a Friday evening combination. It was amazing.
Yeah, extraordinary. Louis Rukeyser, Wall Street Week, that was must before all the cable television and so on and so forth.
It's still must.
It's absolutely must with David Weston right here on Bloomberg Television. But that was an amazing time in the markets as well.
David Weston providing us with real leadership on Wall Street Week as we move forward. I'm not quite sure what they've got for this weekend, but I know they're planning on it here with the markets up so well. It's amazing how one institution, Paul Sweeney, can change the view on a troubled stock. That's really, to see Capital Group going to Deutsche Bank's really a throwback to it. Gabelli's buying.
Exactly.
Remember?
Right. Exactly.
Mario Gabelli's buying an auto company.
Right. Boom. Exactly right. So, yeah, you just know it's a long-term valued investor that, really does their homework. And when they buy something, they take a big stake, in this case, 3.1%, and they historically typically are for the long term.
Man, we did this ages ago, and Paul, I know everybody's guilty of it. Maybe I took it to a fine art. But if you were looking at a longer-term investment in a stock, you really studied who owned it.
Yeah.
You went line by line. This is all before index funds, folks.
Right.
And you wanted to see the names that you trusted, not so much to make money, but to not screw up.
Exactly right.
I found that really held me in good stead over the years.
Yeah, who owns it and who's buying incrementally, who buys on the dips, and you can do that, obviously looking at the Bloomberg data, for example. But,
HDS screen.
Yep, absolutely. So, absolutely. That's, you had to get past the indexes today and take, now it's a little bit about some of the hedge funds that, pop up there. You want to see maybe who's buying, who's selling, but some of the longer term investors, like a Capital Group, like a Fidelity, the active managers that have a proven track record.
I want to go over to media right now, Paul, and I was reading a LinkedIn article by a gentleman, an employee, an officer, I should say, of Hulu. But the partition of his note was not only the subscription growth of Hulu, but the TV growth. Like there's content Hulu, which I guess is killing it. And there's also like the equivalent to regular TV Hulu, like YouTube TV, right?
Yeah. So
how are they doing?
They're doing great. I mean, the Hulu subscribers were very strong that we got just reported by the Walt Disney Company. We had, what was also interesting about the past week or so of earnings was that for the first time, Google broke out YouTube, and it's a $15 billion revenue business.
Did that surprise you?
It was a little bit lower than people had speculated, but still it's a big number, and it had a 30% growth number attached to it for 2018.
Now, folks, for the dumb surveillance question of the day, brought to you by Tom Keene. When I am on a YouTube thing and I wait 4 seconds and I hit skip ad, does somebody make money?
Yes, they do.
How?
Exactly. They make
Why?
They make smaller amounts of money than they would with a 30-second spot on a network television ad, but it's all about volume, because they're getting a gajillion kids and people are on the YouTubes of the world and on the Pluto TV
How
of the
do
world.
the advertisers, it's always Doritos with me, but if Doritos is advertising on YouTube and I watch it for 4 seconds and hit skip ad,
that's enough.
Doritos pays the legacy of Chad Hurley?
Yes, absolutely.
Why?
Because that 4 seconds is better than nothing at all, and you're going to see that ad over and over and over and over again.
Media guy, you're just wrong. With that, let's go to the news in New York City. Here's Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom and Paul. The National Prayer Breakfast is underway in Washington. Both Democratic and Republican leaders, including President Trump, are in attendance. The president lashed out at Democrats over his impeachment and acquittal.
As everybody knows, my family, our great country, and your president have been put through a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people. They have done everything possible to destroy us, and by so doing, very badly hurt our nation.
Later, Trump will hold a news conference today, and on Mitt Romney's guilty vote for impeachment, the Trump campaign has already denounced the Utah Republican as an irrelevant relic. Romney on being the lone Republican to vote to convict the president.
My promise before God to apply impartial justice required that I put my personal feelings and political biases aside.
Bernard Madoff says he doesn't have much time left in prison. Madoff is asking for a compassionate release from his 150-year prison sentence due to kidney failure, saying he has less than 18 months to live. The 81-year-old pleaded guilty in 2009 to 11 federal counts of fraudulent investment involving billions of dollars, swindling hundreds of clients over decades, and orchestrating the largest Ponzi scheme in history. Madoff has served 11 years behind bars. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barr, thanks so much. And I want to make clear, folks, coming up, we will have one of the top aides to Governor Romney at the time, Mitt Romney of Massachusetts, and, of course, moving out to Utah. Lonnie Chen will join us here in a moment. Paul, the bull market is extraordinary. I'm hearing a lot of not bewilderment, but just clear statements from people. They've never seen it like this before. Did you just describe it to Fed policy? The wall of accommodation?
I think you have to. That's kind of where I come down, Tom, because we have not seen earnings growth in 2019 at all. We're not seeing any earnings growth here in the first quarter to speak of, but as Mike Wilson from Morgan Stanley suggested, maybe a trough in earnings, and then we'll see some acceleration in earnings. But boy, you think about the move we had last year, and despite the coronavirus, the stability and strength we're seeing this year.
Extremely well said. And if it's not earnings growth, is it just a belief of ample free cash flow to buy back shares and raise dividends? Is that an undercurrent under Chairman Powell's accommodation?
It is. And it's also, I think that's very much part of it. It's also the fact that our 10-year Treasury yield is at 1.64%. Where are you going to go? And we've got negative rates in Europe. And you take a look at risk-on markets, and the U.S. equity markets seem pretty decent, particularly if there's going to be some earnings growth in 2020. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. Hedge fund billionaire Steve Cohen is ending talks to buy the New York Mets, according to reporting by the New York Post, walking away from a deal that some fans had hoped would give new life to the long-suffering franchise. Cohen was in advanced negotiations to buy 80% of the Major League Baseball team at a league record valuation of $2.6 billion. The team payroll this season was $160 million. That's 10th in Major League Baseball. If Cohen were looking to invest in classic cars instead, here's some advice. Consider a Dodge Viper, model years 1996 to 2002. Average vintage Viper prices in excellent condition hit around $54,000 and are included on auto insurer Hagerty's Bull list for 2020. Other cars worth investing in, the Porsche 996. That's a 911 from 1997 to 2006, the first water-cooled Porsche ever. A 1967 Chevy Corvette and mid-90s Land Rover Range Rover. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and at TikTok on Twitter. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in over 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
The National Prayer Breakfast is underway in Washington. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi offered a prayer for those persecuted for their religion.
Oh Lord, we thank all gathered at this prayer breakfast for lifting our voices for the poor and the persecuted, the millions who are missing or murdered because of their faith.
President Trump also at the National Prayer.
Where are we?
The New Forest.
But I thought we only had the Mini Countryman booked for a test drive. We can't stay here.
We're not going to.
This isn't exactly what I meant.
Relax. With Mini's new 48-hour test drive, you can use the Countryman for exactly what it's built for. Exploring. Plus, it's an SUV, the largest Mini in the range, so you can pack loads more in.
Great. Where next?
Well, you know how you've always wanted to try kayaking?
The Mini Countryman 48-hour test drive. Visit mini.co.uk to book yours. Mini. Who's in? Test drive subject to status and availability. Terms and conditions apply. Participating Mini retailers only.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stocks rose to records before trimming their advances as the rally in risk assets power into a fourth day after China's plans for tariff cuts on U.S. imports added to optimism the global economy will weather the hit from the coronavirus. Right now, the S&P 500, though, as I said, trimming their advance. It's up less than 0.1%, up 2 points at 3336. Dow Jones Industrial Average also trimming its advance, now lower, down 5 at 29,286. And the NASDAQ is up 0.1% or 10 points at 95.21 now. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 1.65%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.44%. NYMEX crude oil is down 0.4% or 23 cents at $50.53 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.4%, $6.20 at $15.69 an ounce. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Thank you so much, Karen. Greatly appreciate it. Yesterday, an historic day for America. No question about that. The president at the prayer breakfast this morning holding up the newspapers of acquittal. He will speak at 12 noon, call it 2 hours. And of course, Bloomberg will have full coverage of that for you. We go on to New Hampshire here in a number of days. We have the perfect guest this morning to frame the emotion of yesterday afternoon as the senator from Utah spoke to his Congress, to his state, and indeed to his family. Lonnie Chen is at the Hoover Institution that barely describes his path as the child of Taiwanese immigrants to a sterling academics at Harvard University and on to being the, and everybody says without any hesitation, the advisor to the governor of Massachusetts, the senator from Utah. Lonnie Chen, have you spoken to Senator Romney in the recent hours?
I have not. No, it was obviously a very emotional moment for him yesterday, and I think we all understand, or those of us who know him understand, that he made that decision with some gravity and not lightly, and so best to let that decision sit with him and his family.
You've been in the vortex of the separating of the Republican Party. How distant are supporters of the senator of Utah, their Republican Party, from the new Republican Party of President Trump?
It's a great question. I think this is going to be the question at the heart of conservative politics for many years to come, which is, you have, in a lot of ways, a separation on a number of different key issues over the years. Now, I think increasingly that Trump coalition and the Republican Party has matched up. And what you've seen in this most recent impeachment vote is the degree to which the president and his supporters have managed to essentially take over the entirety of the Republican Party and the Republican apparatus. And so I think, the issue is going to be in the years to come, how much of this is lasting beyond the president, how much of the president's particular policy proposals, for example, that may not have matched up very well with Republicans in the past, how much of that continues to be the positioning of the party going forward. I don't know that anybody knows the answer to that, but I do think that a lot of that won't get resolved until the president leaves office, whether it's this coming January or 4 years from now.
Lonnie, are you surprised at all that perhaps other senators who maybe privately voiced concerns about President Trump and maybe specifically about the impeachment did not join Senator Romney?
No, I'm not surprised. I think everyone was going to arrive at the decision they were going to arrive at based on the facts they were looking at and the important factors they were considering. But there are as Senator Romney said yesterday, there will be repercussions for him in terms of having to get blowback from Republicans around the country for the decision that he made. And I think it was a very difficult decision. And so it doesn't surprise me that others didn't walk the same path, even if they may have privately felt, look, the president's behavior was not something they agreed with. So what I think is that everybody had to reach the own decision they reached. And at the end of the day, everyone's got to consider the different factors that matter to them. And for Senator Romney, those factors led to the decision that he made.
Lonnie, do you think it's accurate or fair for the Democrats to claim a little bit of a victory here, saying, this was not a partisan witch hunt, that in fact it was bipartisan? We had, even if it was just one Republican, but it was in fact a Republican crossing the aisle.
I don't see how they can claim victory because, look, the president's approval rating is as high as it's ever been. And it's not clear that the American people really felt that the exercise that they went through was wholly productive. I suppose the ultimate verdict will be rendered by the voters in November, and so we'll see. But I have a very difficult time seeing how they can claim victory on anything.
Lonnie Chen with his folks with the Hoover Institution, of course, his support of economic analysis and policy for then presidential candidate Mitt Romney a number of years ago. We're thrilled he could join us today. Lonnie, I want to talk about immigration policy. I do this within the prism of Germany today. I don't know if you've seen off the Bloomberg wires the stunning German vote, which visibly shook Chancellor Merkel's party. We had guests on earlier this morning in London that, again, were visibly shaken by the idea of a centrist and conservative German institution linking up with the far-right party, and some of the language was from another time and place. You have a unique position in the Republican Party with your parents, your heritage from Taiwan, and immigration. What do you propose will be the immigration strategy of Republicans at this convention, the platform at this convention, and how does it shape up post-Trump, whether it's post-Trump now or it's post-Trump in 4 years?
Well, I think that the immigration posture of the Republican Party is going to be exactly what you heard from the president in his State of the Union address the other night. It's going to be calling for stronger border protections, decrying sanctuary cities, and talking about a harder line immigration policy. And certainly as long as President Trump is the president, as long as he's the leader of the Republican Party, that will largely be the position of the party. Now, I think that there are some who believe in the long run questions have to get addressed, not the least of which is the status of those tens of millions of people who are here as undocumented immigrants. And I think that's something that the party is certainly going to have to address and deal with going forward, which is what is the posture going to be on them? What is the posture going to be on the so-called dreamers, for example? And these are all questions that, to allude to your earlier question about the posture of the Republican Party going forward, is that going to be something that they continue to espouse, or something where they take that and they decide to turn away from it, do something different? I think that'll be an unresolved question for when Donald Trump leaves office.
Lonnie Chen, thank you so much. It's been too long. Lonnie Chen with the Hoover Institution there on his former boss, the senator from Utah, Mitt Romney, as well. Red and green on the screen, certainly not the futures pop of 3-4 hours ago, but a churn to it, Paul. As we go into our next hour here of Bloomberg Radio, I guess a shift in the markets from what we saw 4 or 5 hours ago.
Yeah, exactly. So as you mentioned, kind of a churn in the market, a little bit of people trying to get a sense of kind of the risk from the coronavirus in the context of global GDP growth fueled by this liquid marketplaces from the central banks.
I agree with that. Oil south right now, fractionally, but we note $50.45 on West Texas Intermediate. We are produced in New York by someone who lost their Super Bowl bet, Richard Truman, working hard into February. This is Bloomberg. Good morning.
Message and data rate may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because
finding your perfect new home can be tough. So if you keep missing out,
it's time to search out On the Market.
There are thousands of new properties to buy or rent every month at onthemarket.com. 24 hours or more before they're on Rightmove or Zoopla.
On the Market.
See them first. Set up a property alert today.
Search onthemarket.com to find your perfect home.
If you're in the market, search onthemarket.com. See onthemarket.com/new and exclusive. Agents specify exclusivity.
Good book. Refreshing drink. 6 degrees outside. 35 in here. This really is the life.
Could the gentleman in aisle 2 please remove himself from the hot tub?
Oh, so much for try before you buy.
Well, at Ford, you can. Test drive and purchase any new Ford car or commercial vehicle this February, and we'll give you an additional £500 off the recommended retail price. Search Ford Test Drive Promotion. Retail and small business customers only. Contract and register by 29th of February 2020 at participating Ford dealers. Excludes Ford scrappage.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Is there any bank right now in the U.S. that you think is a buy?
Do you think Chairman Powell has lost the market?
Jeff Bezos is no dope. What's the big ka-ching?
The big question, I think, for investors is free cash flow.
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
The U.S. tariffs actually hurt both China and the U.S.
Large strategics are looking to either buy or invest in innovation.
Soybeans and corn have been basically at or below the cost of production for about 4 or 5 years.
What we see more bonds, more yield.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up over the next hour, we are seeing a risk-on-feel in markets despite the fact that the coronavirus continues to spread throughout Asia. We'll talk about these sort of dueling narratives with a strong U.S. economy paired with a rising concern about a pandemic. Right now, though, let's head over to Greg Jarrett for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Lisa, since the opening, stocks have been fluctuating, now moving a little bit more into the green. All this as traders weigh China's plans for tariff cuts on American imports. And as there is lingering concern about the economic hit from the coronavirus, Jeffrey Curry of Goldman Sachs Global Head of Commodities Research tells Bloomberg coronavirus, in his opinion, will hit oil hard.
The impact on the oil market is 2x what you see as the impact on GDP. The reason for that has to do with the fact that you're not only shutting down activity in the country, you're shutting down all the travel.
We check markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's up 0.25%, up 8. The Dow's up 0.1%, up 38, and the Nasdaq's up 0.4%, up 37. The 10-year is down 3/30 seconds. The yield is 1.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude is now down just 0.1% at $50.70 a barrel, while COMEX gold is up 0.25% at $15.6690 an ounce. The dollar yen stands at 109.92. The euro $1.991, and the British pound $1.2955. As we indicated earlier, China will have tariffs on some $75 billion of imports from the U.S. later this month, reciprocating a U.S. action and likely satisfying part of the interim trade deal. The cut will be effective on Valentine's Day in Beijing. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets is underway with Lisa and Paul.
Greg, Jared, thank you so much. We appreciate that. As Greg is reporting, kind of a quiet opening here. First half hour of trading with the S&P up about 7.5 points. There's some earnings out there. There's certainly some news out there. Let's get the latest from Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what are you looking at today?
There's so much going on, it seems like. Just, if only because you're getting such extreme reactions to some of the stock moves. Twitter, perfect example. Biggest gain in the S&P 500, up 16.5%.
Yeah, biggest move in 10 months.
Yeah, that's saying something. That it's definitely a plus. And there are a bunch of others where that comes from. And a couple that are probably noteworthy because they tell you something about the consumer. Estee Lauder, the cosmetics maker, up more than 4% after their results came out. And Tapestry. We're talking Coach. We're talking Stuart Weitzman. We're talking Kate Spade, up almost 5.5% in the wake of their results. So, and heck, you've got Estee Lauder acknowledging that the coronavirus is going to hurt their results in the next few months, and yet they still their fiscal year sales forecast. They brought down the low end a little bit by a percentage point. But what it really comes down to, again, we've seen this pop up the last few days with some of the consumer-oriented companies, is just China's an issue. With the coronavirus and its spread and what it's doing to the economy. But it's not enough to sort of derail these companies because you look elsewhere in the world, they're doing okay.
Okay, so let's put the consumer goods stores aside for just 1 second
Sure.
and talk more generally about earnings. We hear a lot about the beats that we're getting, and yet every quarter it is sort of a charade in the sense that management have to downgrade expectations. Paul just gave me this look of just incredible shock. There's a sense of trying to lowball the expectations and then over delivering. We're getting that again. How much further, though, is this going into the realm of actually upgrading expectations beyond what is currently priced into the market?
Well, the game kind of works both ways, right? In the sense that you get the results and they come out and companies beat estimates. And now you look forward to this year. And one of the stories that I've been talking about is the idea of this quarter-to-quarter growth in profit that analysts are anticipating for the S&P 500. Well, you're seeing those figures come down. And sure, you've still got the progression. It just doesn't look that great in relative terms. And what you get out of it, all told, is something like 8% earnings growth, which sounds okay compared with last year. But still, it's not what we've seen the past few years. And you have to figure that, there's going to be more of this sort of jockeying going on. And to some extent explains the kinds of reactions we're seeing in some of these shares. It just, when they come out ahead, people are really embracing that. And, of course, it works the other way, too. When they fall short, look out. There's certainly some examples of that, too. This healthcare supplier, Becton Dickinson, being down more than 12% today.
Looking at Tesla down about another 2.5% here to $717. Remember, it was just a few days ago, a couple days ago, it hit an intraday or high of $968. Dave, have you seen anything, whether it's Wall Street research or any news articles about anybody trying to explain what happened in that tremendous volatility that we saw and continuing to experience in that name?
Well, they're trying, but in the end of the day, maybe the most telling sort of thing is this post I saw on the Markets Live blog, looking at Tesla today in the context of Volkswagen, Germany's car maker, about a decade ago, where you had an even more extreme sort of move, and the short sellers, the ones that had borrowed the shares and sold it, figuring the price was going down, I mean, they just sort of ran in all at once and covered their shorts, and that's when bought back what they sold. So, I mean, that sort of jumped out earlier on, just as something that, caught my attention. But you don't see a whole lot of examples like this. I mean, my chart of the day, putting Tesla in the context of Qualcomm in 1999, so that's not nothing, but, you don't see it very often. It really does stand out because, the story of a decade or more bull market in U.S. stocks, depending on how you count, is not a lot of euphoria, a whole lot of skepticism. And, that's been a plus in the sense that when people, kind of get too positive, they've done all their buying and shares have nowhere to go but down. So we haven't gotten to that point. And, the broader market, we're looking at an S&P 500 that set a record yesterday. It's setting another record today if it goes up at all.
Yeah.
And yet you've got Tesla kind of telling a different story here.
All right, let's shift gears from equities because they are sort of meandering around here with a couple of pretty big moves on the heels of earnings reports. Really interesting, though, to see what's happening in the commodities complex. Oil got a lift after earlier in the day OPEC Plus talked about production cuts. Now we're hearing that Russia is pushing back, and we're seeing all of the gains basically evaporate from crude traded on the NYMEX, now basically unchanged on the day. And it really raises a question about the effect on commodities of China at a time when they account for half of the global demand for iron ore. It's just one example of their dominance in this sphere. I feel like this is going to pressure inflation expectations lower, keep bond yields lower, which is also what we've seen, and keep pressuring oil, which has been a real painkiller kind of trade.
Well, it's hard to argue that point, especially when you look at today's trading and you go through the 11 main industry groups in the S&P 500. You see 3 of them are down. One of them is utilities, basically a little change. And the other 2, energy and materials. Yep. So there's your commodity trade. And, for energy, it's more the same. Raw materials, not so much. But certainly what's happening in China has a lot of effect around the world, not only the price of the commodities, but also the companies that produce them.
Yeah, just looking at that, the GLCO screen on the Bloomberg terminal, get a little bit of a lift to the metals today, Lisa. Just a smidge, but boy, you look at aluminum down, 4% year to date, copper down about 6.8%. We had that, multiple day, I think 12 or 13 or 14 day decline in copper. So the issue is definitely being felt there, if not so much in the equity markets. But you take a look at the metals, certainly reflecting the global issues.
I'm really looking forward to our upcoming conversation with a senior fellow for global health at the Council on Foreign Relations to really understand what it is that markets are looking at that is giving them such confidence that this is going to be a short-term kind of disruption that will easily be eradicated in subsequent quarters when it comes to the impact to growth. I don't totally see the information underpinning that conviction, and I'm very curious to see what other people are looking at.
Absolutely. We'll get to that later. Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thanks so much for your color on the equity markets here as we have a slight lift to the market this morning. Right now, let's head to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. to Nathan Hager for World and National Headlines. Nathan.
Thank you, Paul. President Trump is set to take a victory lap after his impeachment acquittal in the Senate. He has remarks scheduled today at noon Wall Street time from the White House. Ahead of that, though, he's airing his grievances at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington.
As everybody knows, my family, our great country, and your president have been put through a terrible ordeal.
He said Democrats have done everything possible to destroy us. He thanked courageous Republicans, as he called them, for voting to acquit him. In a possible dig at the one Republican who voted against him, Mitt Romney of Utah, the president said he doesn't like people who use faith to justify doing what they know is wrong. Almost all the votes are in from Iowa's problem-plagued Democratic caucuses, with 97% of precincts in. Pete Buttigieg holds a 0.1% lead over Bernie Sanders. Now, the focus turns to New Hampshire, where Joe Biden hopes to regain some ground after his 4th place finish in the caucuses.
I expected to do better, and I expected that our organization would perform better. But the fact is, I'm happy to be here in New Hampshire.
Biden spoke at a CNN town hall last night. The candidates debate tomorrow night in Manchester, New Hampshire. You can hear that live on Bloomberg Radio beginning at 8 p.m. Wall Street time tomorrow. China has built a second hospital to isolate and treat people with the coronavirus. The new 1,500-bed facility in Wuhan opened days after a 1,000-bed hospital with prefabricated wards started taking patients. Death toll is up to 565, almost all of those in China. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg.
In the real world, there are no rabbits in hats, crystal balls, or cards that turn into money. Instead, you get business information from top-tier analysts and experts.
What should expectations be for this latest round of negotiations?
That's actually better, isn't it?
They're both trying to say they have the upper hand.
Bloomberg Markets with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
My name is Hunter Hayes. I know myself, and I know my buzzed warning signs. One shot is about knowing my limits, or not necessarily knowing my limits.
I start with one shot to have a good time.
One of the signs that I'm starting to feel a little buzz is when I start solving not only my own problems, but the entire world's problems. When I know I'm going out, I know I'm going to start with calling for a ride. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message brought to you by NHTSA and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
What if you could keep the top...
For centuries, Welsh farmers have been perfecting the balance between maintaining the spectacular landscapes of Wales while producing delicious lamb and beef. Lucky for us, we have everything we need from the elements: grass, rainwater, and a whole lot of pride. Sustainability is key as we continue to work in harmony with our surroundings to bring you a plate that's uniquely Welsh. It's in the taste. Learn more at eatwelshlamandwelshbeef.com.
Valentine's Day is coming up, so head to your local Asda in London. We've got extra special cherry blossom and lychee gin liqueur, 50 centilitres for £10. Gifts they'll adore at prices you'll love. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Drink aware.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search
I spy with my little eye something beginning with B.
Bike.
Nope. Banana tree.
Oh, of course. We must have missed it.
Although you might not be able to see it, your small actions can have a real impact with Shell. Drive carbon neutral by filling up and using Shell Go Plus today. Make the change. Drive carbon neutral. Shell. Go well. See goplus.shell.com/CO2 for details.
For up
to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Despite never having used them, Alison Peartree was not initially a fan of purple bricks.
Because I heard from my uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker they don't have proper estate agents.
But Alison's uncle's cousin's neighbour's dog walker was wrong. Purple Bricks have experienced local agents ready to sell your home.
Turns out Martin from Purple Bricks was very knowledgeable. And he didn't charge commission. I've even recommended him to my sister's boyfriend's auntie's hairdresser, Sharon.
Purple Bricks. Book your free valuation today.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing service cost extra.
At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen from design to show-off ready and take care of everything. And now, save a third on showroom kitchen units. Book your free design appointment today. Cure your house embarrassment with Wix. For minimum spend, terms and exclusions, see wix.co.uk.
The famous five were at home discussing their next adventure. "Let's visit Tower Bridge," said Dick. "Or Cardiff Castle," added Julian. "St Michael's Mount," cried Anne. Dick jumped up. "Wherever we're going, we'll need to leave right now." "Relax," said George. "It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pyjamas." With faster journeys across our network, adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Terms and conditions apply. Selected routes only.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks touched an all-time high again, but are easing off the gas pedal right now. Still in the green, though. The S&P was up more than 3% for the week as it edged higher. Companies are focused on consumer staples, and that's faring the best. Stocks gained in Europe and soared in Asia after China said it will lower levies on $75 billion of U.S. goods next week. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500's up 0.2%, up 5. The Dow is little changed. The NASDAQ is up 0.3%, up 27. The 10-year right now is down 230 seconds with a yield of 1.65%. West Texas Intermediate crude is down 0.3% at $50.61 a barrel, while COMEX gold is up 0.3% at $15.68.10 per ounce. The dollar yen 109.92. The euro is currently $9.83, and the British pound $29.50. Brazilian State Development Bank has unloaded its voting stake in oil giant Petrobras, raking in 22 billion reais, or $5.2 billion, as part of a wave of asset sales aimed at reversing years of growing government influence in Latin America's biggest economy. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, the coronavirus unfortunately shows no signs of abating at this point, despite some fairly aggressive efforts on the part of the Chinese government. To get an update on what is going on in China, we welcome Yang Chang Huang. She Senior Fellow for Global Health, Council of Foreign Relations, also Professor and Director of Global Health Studies at Seton Hall University School of Diplomacy and International Relations, based in New York City. Thanks so much for joining us. Give us a sense, if you would, of kind of your perception of how China has reacted and has been dealing with this virus.
Thank you. Beginning on January 23rd, the Chinese government has imposed draconian measures in containing the spread of the virus. They have quarantined the city of Wuhan in central China and the surrounding cities, and also have imposed very draconian measures in other parts of China in terms of tracking the close contact and the quarantining people and placing those people under some people under medical observation. So the entire China now is being like a big quarantine center, if you will.
Professor, there's a question about the fact that it does not seem to be stymieing the spread of this virus, with a lot of experts saying it's only a matter of when, not if, it spreads throughout the world. We're already seeing that to some capacity. Does this suggest that China's efforts to contain this virus have failed, or does it just suggest that this virus, like the flu, is just not containable?
Well, I think it's still too early to call this a failure or success. If you look at the number of cases, confirmed cases continue to increase. Now is about more than 28,000 in mainland China. There's about 560 deaths. But if you look at the newly infected cases as well as the suspected cases each day, outside Hubei province, that's where Wuhan is located, it seems that we haven't seen any too dramatic increase of the number. If we trust the number is correct, that it seems to show this possible plateau of transmission, although that trend is still not very clear.
So, Professor, give us a sense what it means for the individuals in Wuhan and in that province. I mean, it's been essentially shut down for a couple of weeks. How are people kind of getting along day to day, making ends meet, paying the bills, that type of thing?
Well, it is now very difficult time for them, especially for those people who are infected and now are trying to seek medical help. And unfortunately, because the healthcare institutions are completely overwhelmed, they have difficulty being admitted into the hospital. So that themselves actually become a risk for the spread of the virus. The situation is very, very bad.
So just right now, as we take a look at what's going on with respect to the spread of the coronavirus, seems very, very bad. Markets shrugging it off, saying it's containable, or at least it's going to blow over. Do you think that it's too soon to say that, or do you think that based on the fatality rate and based on the lack of spread outside of China, that this has been to a large degree contained, at least to China?
Well, I think this would be our hope, actually. I think it would be, we will be really, really lucky if that virus continues to be contained in China, even though there are people there, especially the people in Wuhan, in the Hubei province, are making a lot of sacrifices. And so I think it is very, very important we support China's containment efforts.
Thank you so much for being with us, Professor. Professor Yan-Chung Huang, Senior Fellow for Global Health for the Council on Foreign Relations, also a Professor and Director of Global Health Studies at Seton Hall University's School of Diplomacy and International Relations. Definitely a big question right now. How successful have the containment efforts been? A lot of people saying the next 48 to 72 hours. Crucial to see whether or not we're going to see an exponential increase, considering the fact that we're entering on that 2-week incubation
That's what I was thinking
period.
About.
Yeah.
That's right.
So we'll actually start to see more. And one thing that's really made this a huge challenge, just in general, has been the fact that the actual symptoms aren't always that significant. That can replicate, a common cold, so it's harder to contain. Yeah. Just in other news, Lisa, I just want to point out we did have an IPO price overnight. Casper Sleep. Yeah. I'm looking at it right now. It priced at $12 a share. Indications right now 14.25 to 14.5. So it looked like it might open a little bit up. You got to remember, this is a company that had to reduce the price range, and they actually priced at the low end of the reduced price range. So kind of raising the concern that here's another IPO not having a great potential entry into the public markets relative to the private markets. But so we're trying to get that stock open this morning. Amazing that its valuation in public markets was about half of the private market implication for the capital raise at the end of last year. Just fascinating. Another sort of, I don't want to say WeWork situation, but another sort of underwhelming, cash-burning unicorn darling, although not even a unicorn anymore, I guess. No, I guess you're right. And it just kind of follows on the heels of what we saw in 2019 with Uber and Lyft and Smile Direct, companies that receive public market valuations below the private, which historically is extremely rare. Indeed. Right now, coming up, we're going to be taking a look at the new Vanguard private equity fund, what it says, who it threatens. Is this an issue for advisors or also for private equity firms, and what they are charging for fees? also we're going to be speaking about the political issues heading out of Washington, D.C. leading up to the 2020 elections. This is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are edging higher. China's cutting tariffs on $75 billion of imports in half from February 14th. That's the same time that U.S. tariffs on Chinese goods are set to be cut. The reductions are part of the Phase 1 trade deal signed last month. World Wrestling Entertainment plunging in trading after posting fourth quarter results and a sales forecast that missed Wall Street projections. Management also warned that initiatives to drive growth and monetization of its content are subject to considerable uncertainty. Toyota has raised its forecast for the full year. That's after the automaker reported quarterly profit that beat estimates. Toyota's focus on cost control is helping the company buck a trend in recent auto earnings. And convicted scam artist Bernie Madoff says he's dying and he wants out of prison. Madoff has asked a federal judge to release him after serving just 10 years of his 150-year sentence. Madoff said he suffers from terminal kidney failure and other ailments. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
Jelly. Jelly adjective. Jelly is a shorter, better way to say jealous. As in, Chloe, I am like so jelly of your unicorn phone case.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt US Kids, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Let's get this right, sir. You didn't see three men dressed as clowns take off in a van with a Renaissance painting because you were distracted by, and I quote, a sporty red compact SUV with a bold mesh grille, a sculpted bonnet with sweeping roofline on diamond-cut alloys.
And beautiful rear haunches.
So, you saw a Jaguar E-Pace. But what about the clowns?
What clowns?
Jaguar E-Pace, designed to steal attention. Search Jaguar E-Pace.
I spy with my little eye something beginning with B.
Bike.
Nope. Banana tree.
Oh, of course. We must have missed it.
Although you might not be able to see it, your small actions can have a real impact with Shell. Drive carbon neutral by filling up and using Shell Go Plus today. Make the change. Drive carbon neutral. Shell. Go well. See goplus.shell.com/CO2 for details.
Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
A lot of people aren't aware that TuneIn lets you listen to the same terrestrial stations that you pick up on your FM AM dial, except you can hear them from anywhere. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Casting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at what it means for President Trump's acquittal in the Senate and what that means for the 2020 presidential race. Plus, we'll also chat with our good friend Barry Ritholtz, Bloomberg opinion columnist, on the new Vanguard private equity fund and what that means for investors. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Stocks are bouncing around, Paul, after reaching an all-time high. Traders are still looking at China's plans for tariff cuts on American imports, and they're still concerned about the lingering economic hit from the coronavirus. David Folkers-Landau, Deutsche Bank chief economist, tells Bloomberg recent market optimism is not all about the easing coronavirus fears.
But ultimately, what we believe gives real sort of muscle to the optimism and the mood here is the U.S. election and the vote on Trump and the fiasco of the Democrats. For the first time, there used to be sort of 60-70%. They were saying Trump is going to get re-elected, at least in our industry. I think now the chances of that happening are high.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 0.1%, up 4. Dow's little change, down 10, and the Nasdaq's up 0.3%, up 26. 10 years down 2/30 seconds. The yield is 1.65%. West Texas Intermediate crude has changed course. It's now up 0.3% at $50.90 a barrel, with COMEX gold up 0.3% at $15.6780 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 109.92. The euro $1.0975. And the British pound $1.2946. Twitter topped analyst projections for fourth quarter revenue and added more new daily users than expected, citing product improvements. Right now, Twitter is up 16%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
In about 90 minutes' time, we're going to be hearing from President Trump after he was acquitted of the impeachment charges brought to him by the House of Representatives. Senators, particularly the Republicans, really joined forces and voted to acquit him. Joining us now to discuss, Ramesh Ponnuru, senior editor for The National Review, also a Bloomberg opinion columnist coming to us from Washington, D.C. I just want to start, Ramesh, your opinion of the stance that Republicans took. Do you think that they did the right thing in acquitting President Trump?
I think that Senator Romney had the better of the argument among Republicans. I think that President Trump abused his power, and even some of the Republicans who voted to acquit him agreed with that. And the impeachment power was put into the Constitution by the founders precisely to deal with presidential abuses of power of this nature. So I think he should have been convicted.
Ramesh, the National Review is thought of as a right-leaning, a conservative-leaning, typically Republican publication. How much pushback do you get when you say things like this, given the fact that President Trump has a near record amount of support among Republicans?
Well, the official editorial position of the magazine is on the other side for me. Most of my colleagues are on the other side, so I do get a lot of pushback, disagreement, sometimes very politely and thoughtfully expressed from our readers, sometimes less so.
So, Ramesh, let's look forward a little bit. What do you think the acquittal in the Senate means for President Trump and the Democrats? How do you think that's going to kind of play out for the election?
I suspect that it will not be a top-of-mind issue by the time of the election. I just think that we have a lot of time between now and November, and media cycles and news cycles are just a lot faster than they used to be. So I think we'll all probably be obsessing about something else in the last weeks of October and the beginning of November.
Do you think that going forward that this will actually solidify President Trump's base behind him, or do you think that this will just sort of be a side note as we proceed toward November?
President Trump has been extremely careful to keep his base together. He has done a lot of things that previous Republican presidents would not have done, but on the core issues that matter to Republican voters, like guns and taxes and abortion, he's been a completely orthodox Republican. And so he had a unified base even before impeachment. Impeachment may have slightly solidified that base, but the partisan dynamic of a presidential election was likely to generate that result anyway.
Ramesh, what do you make of Senator Mitt Romney's decision to vote to convict?
Well, I think that it surprised a lot of people who had just resigned themselves to this being an almost completely, perfectly party line vote. I think Senator Romney made a good case for his decision. It's not, obviously doesn't change the outcome, but it just sort of puts him on record about what the appropriate norms for presidential conduct ought to be.
Ramesh, considering your stance that you thought that President Trump should have been convicted, do you think that he should lose, or are you voting for someone else in November?
Well, I don't even know who the Democratic nominee is going to be. I certainly think it's unlikely that I am going to vote for President Trump. I didn't vote for him last time, and I continue to have serious objections to the way he has conducted himself in office.
Do you think there are any Democrats as currently constituted in the field that can beat President Trump?
Right now, I'd say that President Trump is probably favored to win, but I wouldn't say that he's inevitably going to win. And I think a number of the Democratic candidates could potentially defeat him. Some are, I think, riskier than others. I think Senator Sanders would be a risky nominee for the Democratic Party, given the historic and continuing unpopularity of socialism in the United States.
Ramesh Ponnuru, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your thoughts. Ramesh Ponnuru is a senior editor for the National Review, also a Bloomberg Opinion columnist as well. And you can read the work from Ramesh and the other Bloomberg Opinion columnists at bloomberg.com/opinion and on the terminal at OPIN Go.
Yeah, we're going to be hearing from President Trump in less than 90 minutes, talking about what just happened. In fact, the acquittal of his impeachment charges. I think the larger question that people are talking about is the economic headwinds for him, the idea, tailwinds, the idea that the economy is still strong and he can herald that. And so what is the response going to be from the Democrats to say, well, here are the problems and here are our solutions. Where are the ideas? And I think that that's sort of one big challenge at a time when President Trump has a lot to crow about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at the markets right here, we still have a little bit of a green on the screen. The S&P up 7 points, Dow up just about 12 points, 29,303 on the Dow Jones Industrial. NASDAQ up 36 points. That's about 0.4%. Right now, let's head down to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. to Nathan Hager for World and National Headlines. Nathan.
Well, Paul and Lisa, we've already heard from President Trump. He is airing his grievances about impeachment at the annual National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, calling the trial a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people.
They have done everything possible to destroy us, and by so doing, very badly hurt our nation.
And in an apparent swipe at Mitt Romney, the one Republican senator who voted to convict the president yesterday, he said he does not like people who use their faith as a justification for doing what they know is wrong. And as he stepped onto the stage, the president held up newspapers with the headline, "Acquitted." As you mentioned, he will have more to say about impeachment in a White House speech set for noon Wall Street time. Bloomberg Radio will carry it live. The White House is threatening to veto a disaster aid package for Puerto Rico after its recent earthquakes. Bloomberg's Amy Morris reports.
The House could vote as early as tomorrow on H.R. 5687, which includes $4.67 billion in appropriations, plus tax relief measures that the Joint Committee on Taxation says would add $16.1 billion to the deficit over a decade. House Republicans have promised to oppose the bill for being too expensive. Tom Cole of Oklahoma said, quote, "It's not going to be picked up by the Senate. It's not going to be signed by the president." In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
Israeli soldiers killed 2 Palestinians in the West Bank and a third in Jerusalem who'd opened fire at a police officer. Tensions on the rise after President Trump released his Middle East peace plan last week. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting...
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
Sign up to Walk All Over Cancer with Cancer Research UK. Walk 10,000 steps every day in March, and together we will beat cancer.
Are you ready, Boots?
It's a sunny day, perfect for walking.
Start walking.
Use the 10,000 steps a day challenge to explore London, get fit, and help beat cancer. Come on, search Walk All Over Cancer and sign up now.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing.
And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are fluctuating, but still into the green after reaching all-time highs. Traders are still looking at China's plans for tariff cuts on American imports. And there is still worry about the economic hit from the coronavirus. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 0.25%, up 9. The Dow's up 0.2%, up 50, and the Nasdaq's up 0.5%, up 43. The 10-year is down 3/32. The yield is 1.66%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 0.1% at $50.79 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.1% at $15.6520 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 109.99. The euro is $1.0972, and the British pound $1.2935. World Wrestling Entertainment posted fourth quarter results in a sales forecast that missed Wall Street projections, and management warns initiatives to drive growth and monetization of its content are subject to considerable uncertainty. The stock plunged as much as 18% in early trading. Now it's down 4.8%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, Lisa and I have been talking about really over the last several days, we're somewhat surprised at how well the equity markets are kind of discounting, if you will, the coronavirus and the economic impact that may have going forward. To help us kind of put into perspective kind of what's going on out there in the world, we welcome, as always, our good friend Barry Ritholtz, Bloomberg opinion columnist and host of Masters in Business on Bloomberg Radio. Also the founder, chairman, and chief investment officer of Ritholtz Wealth Management, joining us here on our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. So, Barry, one of the things that, we're 10 or 11 years into this economic cycle, and people are thinking about what's going to cause or push us into the next recession. What are your thoughts on that as we think about the coronavirus and all the other crazy things going on out in the world?
So the two big things I keep hearing from pundits and investors and economists, one is a geopolitical event, and certainly the coronavirus qualifies as that. And the other is this, look at Tesla, this crazy tech boom and bubble is going to lead us to a recession, and I don't think either of those are genuine recessionary factors. Let's start with the coronavirus, which I know you guys can't get enough of. You've been talking about it solidly for a week. Look, this is going to hurt.
I think I'm coming down with the case.
Right. Well, you want the B version. The A version is the problematic
Look
one.
at that. You think we're obsessed. You actually are like here
I just made
quoting
that up,
virology.
just so you know.
Carry
have no
on.
idea what
All
I'm
right.
talking about. But,
markets.
So when you look at the impact of this, it's going to affect imports and exports out of China. It'll affect Australia and Korea and Vietnam. There'll be some knock-on effect in the United States. But this isn't the sort of thing, without it spiraling wildly out of control, this isn't the sort of thing that leads to a recession. So we have less than 1,000 deaths, right, which are tragic, and we have about 10,000 cases. And I think the death rate is somewhere around 2%, which is high. But last year in the United States, there were 10,000 influenza deaths. The flu kills 10,000 people a year out of admittedly much higher infection rates. It's about a 10th or a 15th of a percent. So this doesn't cause a global recession.
But this is basically what's being priced into the market today. That people are saying, we hear you, valuations in the tech companies high, and yet this is the future, so, well, why not? And that seems to be justified to some degree by some of the results.
It's more than that. I'm going to jump in right here.
All right, carry on.
It's much more than that, because if you look at the trailing 5-year returns, the S&P 500 is up 65% over the past 5 years. The tech sector, a lot more growth, a lot more potential. It's up 125%, which sounds like a lot. Look at the exact same 5-year period, only instead of going back from February 2020, look at it from February 2000. The previous 5 years, the NASDAQ gained 865%, 7 times the past 5 years' growth of the NASDAQ now. And let me also point out that tech stocks are making boodles and boodles of money. They're enormously profitable. Look at Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. Go down the list of the amount of cash on the balance sheet. This is not the dot-com era. This isn't even remotely close. These are large, profitable companies, some of which are monopolies. Google, Facebook, arguably monopolies.
Well, it's interesting. I just pointed out something that Danielle DiMartino Booth just retweeted. She appears on our show often, basically just kind of referencing what's going on in the repo market and the fact that the Fed's injecting money into the short end of the market. And she says that is what's driving the markets.
Everybody is entitled to be as wrong as they want. And I have been arguing with Danielle DiMartino about this for a solid decade. Let's assume she's right. Okay, so the Fed is doing this. Now you know the Fed is driving the market higher, then you must really like stocks, because there is no sign the Fed's going to stop doing this. I don't believe the repo market directly lends in equity valuations.
So put the repo market aside, because a lot of people say that that's just completely a structural issue. It's not necessarily pumping liquidity into markets. There have been a lot of arguments, Bill Dudley in particular making it in a Bloomberg Opinion column recently, and former New York Fed president. But just on a larger point here, this concept of Fed stimulus, I think is poignant at a time when Christine Lagarde came out overnight, the ECB president, and said, we don't have that much more leverage to lower rates, to stimulate the economy. Hey, lawmakers, it's your turn. And that's what she was saying. And you're hearing this increasingly, this feeling that, yeah, they're in there supporting the market, but they're running out of ammunition. That doesn't concern you, the fact that they're running out of ammunition and they haven't gotten inflation up further, and you're seeing CapEx go down? I mean, there are a whole host of things you can point to be bearish.
So I have a post up on the blog a couple of years ago with a quote: the Fed is running out of ammunition, central bankers are running out of ammunition. This is a slide in a presentation I do. Every year for the past 12 years, someone has come out and said the Fed is running out of ammunition. And as far as I can tell, they have an infinite amount of ammunition because they issue credit and they affect rates. P.S. Nobody is making buy or sell decisions these days about CapEx, about homes, about any large purchase because of where rates are. If rates go up 1%, they're still historically cheap. So that's not the issue. When we say the Fed is running out of ammo, the question is, how low are they going to keep rates and for how long, and how much is that affecting other people's purchase decisions, consumer demand, etc. I don't like the entire Fed argument, the central bank argument. It's clear the economy is still in a post-credit crisis state, and it is not the most robust. Contrary to what you may have heard at the State of the Union address, the global economy and the U.S. economy have been highly dependent on monetary policy. I'll give that much to Danielle. She's right about that. And where Christine Lagarde is half right is that we understand the Keynesian playbook. In a crisis, when demand from consumers and demand from the business sector drops, the government should step in with fiscal stimulus. The fact that we've gone so long relying mostly on monetary policy is a giant policy mistake. It should have been fiscal stimulus from day one with monetary stimulus right behind it. Christine Lagarde is absolutely right, albeit a decade late. And it is, remember the Austerians in the UK and Europe? They took a bad situation and said, how can we make this much, much worse? I know, let's cut back spending right into the teeth of a drop of demand. And they very successfully made the circumstances in Europe much worse. Yeah. There is a reason why the U.S. recovery preceded that in Japan and that in Europe. We recognized this immediately for what it was. We had Bernanke doing monetary stimulus, and we still did a modest $700 or $800 billion stimulus. It should have been $3 or $4 trillion, but let's hold that aside.
Barry Ritholtz, founder of Ritholtz Wealth Management, Bloomberg opinion columnist, founder of Ritholtz Wealth Management, and incredible orator on the woes and the lack of fiscal stimulus. I will say, I love them sitting around thinking, how can we make this much, much worse? Here we go. I will say one thing that Christine Lagarde is looking at is the German manufacturing recession, with factory orders slumping the most in a decade in December. So this coming in front of any potential impact from the coronavirus. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Business is like a puzzle.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Kansas.
Search NFL today.
Start hearing more of what you want. Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
At Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Where's your views on the municipal bond landscape?
The market does not like uncertainty, does not react well to uncertainty.
There's a whole lot of optimism around the valuation of Uber.
What is Ford saying about the self-driving car?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Maybe we're getting hooked on debt and low interest rates.
The black hole called power could be a bigger black hole.
Only buy IPO stock that you can't get. If you can get it, it's probably a dog you don't want it.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Coming up, chaos in the commodity markets. We're going to talk to Mike McGlone of Bloomberg Intelligence and get the latest on all things commodity. Plus, we're going to chat with Chris Edwards of the Cato Institute on his thoughts on how the U.S. government is marching into a fiscal crisis potentially. But first, let's go to Greg Jarrett of Bloomberg News for a Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Chaos in the commodity market. Sounds like a Marvel movie. S&P is up more than 3% for the week as it traded little change today, but it's moving back up into the green again. The telecom companies are faring the best, and we'll tell you why in a second. Stocks gained in Europe and soared in Asia after China said it will lower levies on $75 billion of U.S. goods next week, adding a tailwind to growth while some warn of complacency among investors. Frédéric Audier, Société Générale, tells Bloomberg he sees coronavirus as a headwind.
It's not at all the exposure we have in China, direct, which is small. But like any company, what it could mean for the global economy. So let's wait. There's a lot of uncertainty. Hopefully, there will be, of course, a solution for that. But beyond this, I would say we are pretty confident. Yes, we have a slowdown in the economies, but something relatively moderate in mind. And again, in our case, we think we can deliver better performance in 2020 thanks for all the hard work which was done in 2019.
That is Frédéric Audier. Intelsat has reached a deal with federal regulators on compensation for giving up airwaves in an auction. That's supposed to be announced on February 28th, according to sources. The stock is up 33%. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day. S&P 500 is up 0.2%, up 6. Dow's up 0.1%, up 34. NASDAQ's up 0.4%, up 37. The 10-year is down 1/32. The yield is 1.65%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 0.1% at $50.80 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.3% at $15.67.30 an ounce. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Bloomberg Markets continues now with Lisa and Paul.
Thank you so much, Greg Jarrett. Bloomberg Markets brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the 6th straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. And I just want to bring you this Casper Sleep, which did have its initial public offering yesterday at $12 per share, open for trading at $14.50. This is coming after raising about half of where the company had been valued when it raised money in a private fundraising round last year. So higher, though, than where it was priced. We will continue to bring more when we get it. Right now, let's get a sense of how the small and mid-cap shares are doing. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks Editor, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios. Interesting, they have been underperforming throughout the year when it comes to small caps versus large caps. And today, Dave
More
Wilson,
of the same.
there you go.
All right, then. Yeah, they could use some of that Casper gain today, no question. The Russell 2000 index down 0.1%, and the S&P 500 is up 0.2%. Now, the steepest drop in the Russell belongs to Funko, whose ticker is FNKO. The toy maker has tumbled 36.5%. Preliminary fourth quarter earnings and sales were well below the average analyst estimates in a Bloomberg survey. Matrix Service, ticker MTRX, has fallen about 30.5%. The oil services company had an unexpected loss for the fiscal second quarter and cut its full year forecast to a loss from a profit. True Blue, ticker TBI, has fallen more than 23.5%. The staffing company's fourth quarter earnings and revenue were lower than estimates, and its first quarter forecasts were also disappointing. Now, the biggest gain in Russell belongs to Unisys, ticker UIS. The technology consultant has soared almost 41% after agreeing to sell its U.S. government business to Science Applications International, also known as SAIC, for $1.2 billion. And Forescout Technologies, ticker FSCT, has climbed 19%. The security software maker accepted a $1.9 billion buyout offer from Advent International.
Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Well, when I pop up the GLCO screen on the Bloomberg terminal, I see nothing but year-to-date negative numbers, red numbers, with the exception of spot gold and sugar. To get a sense of what's going on in the commodity markets, is it all just the coronavirus, or what else is driving commodities lower? We welcome Mike McGlone, commodity strategist for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us here in our Bloomberg 1130 studio. So, Mike, what's going on in your world?
The key thing to remember before we even mention the coronavirus is the trend is your friend in commodities, and it's downward. It's been downward for over a decade, and the coronavirus just accelerated that trend. It's been a path. I mean, remember before the coronavirus, last year we had the African swine fever. Okay, so it's something happening, and we have depreciating Chinese GDP growth. But let's start with first the bullish side. Gold, I see as, you know what, the high last year was 1552. The low in this recent dip was about 1550. So gold's holding at a 7-year high. That should be sustained. The coronavirus is helping. But the key thing driving that is lower yields. The big picture for commodities is they've been following lower yields for a decade.
How much of the commodity story is the commodity priced in dollar story, the idea that the dollar has been strengthening despite calls for it to weaken? And since all of these commodities are priced in dollars, therefore the implied price goes down versus other currencies.
Part of the perfect storm. It's that whole concept that making America great again is really bad for commodities. It makes the dollar strong. And remember, this year is a paradigm shift. This year, we're the net exporter of liquid fuel, energy, and we've already been the largest exporter of food in the world. So there's that classic wealth of nations factor that's a major... I guess it's a headwind for commodity prices, most notably food and energy, copper, crude oil. And I don't see what it's going to take to end that. Dollar needs to peak. What's going to make for the dollar to really peak? Technology stocks probably have to trade lower, and we know that's a pretty bullish trend.
So you mentioned copper. It's been one of the ones hardest hit just recently, year to date, down 6.8%, although up, getting a little bounce today, up about 0.5%. Is the copper... Is that kind of what people look for? Which metal is most at risk from a slowing Chinese economy? Is that kind of where you go first?
That's the first place to go. The key problem with copper earlier in the year and late last year, people got way too bullish. They expected a complete reversal of what's been happening. Not complete, just this trade détente to really help. And I looked at it like it's just an opportunity to sell. So copper recently hit a 3-year low. If it does what it's been doing, it's going to bounce. It's a trading market. You get, people are short, they get them a little short and take it back out, but the path of least resistance remains down. I'm worried that by the time we get to the end of this year, if we get a little bit higher stock market volatility, just a normalization in the stock market, copper has about a 2 to 3 to 1 beta versus the stock market now, because it's not going up when stocks go up. What does that mean when stocks actually stop going up?
Meanwhile, oil has been in the crosshairs of the coronavirus spreading throughout China and beyond, with the demand dropping substantially. And we've got OPEC Plus coming out and saying they're talking about potentially cutting production. Russia pushing back on that, saying just hold on a second. You're seeing basically oil flat, traded on the NYMEX at $50.92. What are you expecting to see here in the sort of weeks ahead that will determine the breakout, whether it is up or down?
First thing to remember in crude oil, it's a consolidating bear market. The median mode of the last 5 years is 50. The peak is 145. It needs something different to really go higher, i.e. OPEC is fighting a losing battle. They need to cut. Let's put it this way. If we are at 60, they wouldn't worry. The fact that we're at 50, they got to worry. And we see the situation with Russia. They're going to just keep pumping because they can. They say their break-even price is around 40. So we need something different and to change. Again, the U.S. is a net exporter, formerly the world's largest importer.
Well, Mike, we got to touch on this. Lisa's favorite commodity, lean hogs, down 19.5% this year. They can't find a bid for the pork belly. Just want to bring that to your attention.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. That is definitely. We talk a lot about bacon here.
I have 4 sons, so bacon's a big deal in our family.
Mike McGlone, commodity strategist. Thank you so much, and bacon aficionado for Bloomberg Intelligence, joining us here in our interactive broker studio. It's really interesting to see how, even though you are seeing something of a rally in equities, you're not seeing the same sort of enthusiasm in the commodity complex today as you have been seeing as people weigh the fact that China accounts for such a massive proportion of the demand. I was looking at iron ore demand. Half of it comes from China.
Wow.
Half of the global demand for iron ore, which explains why that commodity has gotten hit so hard. And also we're talking about soy and things that would have been affected by the trade deal now called into question as we wonder how much China can really come through on that in the face of the coronavirus. Right now, let's head to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager there. Nathan.
Lisa, President Trump took out his gripes over impeachment at this morning's National Prayer Breakfast. He held up newspapers headlined "Trump acquitted" before taking aim at his opponents.
I don't like people who use their faith as justification for doing what they know is wrong. Nor do I like people who say, "I pray for you," when they know that that's not so.
Those were apparent digs at Republican Senator Mitt Romney, who cited his faith before casting his guilty vote yesterday, and House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who has said she prays for the president. Trump will have more to say about impeachment in a White House speech set for noon Wall Street time that you will hear live on Bloomberg Radio. The Democratic presidential race is now on to New Hampshire, even as the vote counting continues from the Iowa caucuses, with 97% of precincts reporting about 48 hours later. Pete Buttigieg leads Bernie Sanders by 0.1%. Elizabeth Warren is in third place. Joe Biden is in fourth and retuning his message.
The former vice president crisscrossing his way throughout the Granite State here in New Hampshire, saying that if the Democrats put up a Democratic socialist, that they would all but hand the re-election to President Trump.
Bloomberg's Kevin Cirilli in Manchester, where the candidates debate tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Wall Street time. You can hear that on Bloomberg Radio. The Chinese city of Wuhan is telling residents to report their body temperature each day, just one effort to contain the coronavirus that has now claimed more than 560 lives. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
Our relationship with Asia is simple. Find the most experienced journalists.
These countries will need each other more and more in the future.
Let them gather the best data and experts.
Let's get to Singapore now and our guest.
Then bring everything they find straight to you.
Let's talk about where you are. There's quite a lot of headwinds there too.
Actually, it's not simple. It's just better. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Hi, everyone. Al Roker here. As a guy with his own catchphrase, I appreciate that after 75 years, Smokey's only said,
"Only you can prevent wildfires."
But I'm filling in because there's a lot more to report. Like when it's dry or windy. Be careful burning yard waste, because wildfires can even start in your neck of the woods. Go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Open calendar. What's my schedule looking like?
Next Thursday, you will be caught in an emergency flash flood between Park and First Street.
What? No, that doesn't work. I'm busy then. Decline. Decline.
Floods don't exactly work around your schedule. Disasters don't plan ahead. But you can. It starts with talking to your loved ones about making an emergency plan. So don't wait. Communicate. Get started today at ready.gov/plan. Brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council.
What if you could... Whatever job you're searching for, you can find it on LinkedIn. First jobs, flexible jobs, keep me out the cold jobs, advertising jobs, accounting jobs, HR, PR, even ER jobs, East London jobs, West London jobs, extra hour in bed jobs, startup jobs, late start jobs, get home in the daylight jobs, banking jobs, building jobs, flexible working on a Friday jobs, or even voiceover jobs, which is how I ended up recording this ad. Search millions of jobs on LinkedIn and find one meant for you.
Valentine's Day is coming up, so head to your local Asda in London. We've got Bailey's Red Velvet, 70 centilitres for £16. Gifts they'll adore at prices you'll love. Don't compromise. Asda. Save money, live better. Selected stores and lines subject to availability. Drink aware.
Dad, I'm doing the mashed potatoes too.
Do the Albert Bartlett potato mash.
Do the twist.
Do the patatas bravas with a British twist.
Yeah. Do the brown sauce, balsamic and chutney.
Oh, do the melting potato slices.
Do the dishes.
Grab a brand new recyclable bag today and do the Albert Bartlett.
He's got a brand new bag.
up to 50% off selected floors and beds, and up to an additional £250 off your total flooring order. Carpet Right for life. Terms and conditions apply.
At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen from design to show-off ready and take care of everything. And now, save a third on showroom kitchen units. Book your free design appointment today. Cure your house embarrassment with Wix. For minimum spend, terms and exclusions, see wix.co.uk.
The UK has now left the EU, and we're in a transition period until the end of the year. Throughout this period, the government will be forging new partnerships with the EU and the rest of the world. This could lead to new arrangements for trade, travel, and business. To find out about the changes and how they might affect you, go to gov.uk/transition.
The famous five were at home discussing their next adventure. "Let's visit Tower Bridge," said Dick. "Or Cardiff Castle," added Julian. "St Michael's Mount," cried Anne. Dick jumped up. "Wherever we're going, we'll need to leave right now." "Relax," said George. "It's faster than you think by train. Anyway, we can't go yet. You're still in your pyjamas." With faster journeys across our network, adventures are closer than you think. Great Western Railway. Adventures start here. Terms and conditions apply. Selected routes only.
Wendy Sanchez, live from Spain with Henry the Coconut. Henry, what are your thoughts on First Choice doing holidays for under $299 each? Henry the Coconut, could you comment, please? Look, Henry, we shaved your bristles and drew you a face. The least you could do is chat to us about First Choice holidays under $299 each. Say something!
Ridiculous deals need ridiculous adverts. First Choice. Ridiculously good value.
Offers per person and subject to limited availability. At all protected.
Oh my days, it's storming the charts at 169.
And last over the line, number 169. You're 169 in line to the throne.
The number 169 never screamed going places until now. Get the Toyota Igo X-Play for only £169 deposit. Then £169 a month with 0% APR representative. Just go. Igo.
0% APR representative on new sales of Igo X-Play over 48 months. £169 per month. Customer deposit of £169 when proposed and approved via Access Toyota by 31st of March 2020. £3,311.25p optional final payment. Subject to status to over 18s. Indemnities may be required. Conditions apply. Toyota Financial Services.
4 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
We keep touching all-time highs for equities. China's plans for tariff cuts are influencing the market. Then they seem to ease off the upward flow, and it's back and forth. It's a seesaw is what I'm going to say. We check those numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is now up 0.3%, up 9. The Dow's up 0.2%, up 50, and the Nasdaq's up 0.5%, up 50. The 10-year is unchanged right now with a yield of 1.65%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 0.6%, 51.03 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.3% at 15.6770 an ounce. The dollar yen is at 109.95. The euro's $1.976, and the British pound $1.2929. Twitter topped analyst projections for fourth quarter revenue and added more daily users than expected, new ones. So Twitter, consequently, is doing very well, up 17% right now. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
You're listening to Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Yesterday, the Treasury Department gave details about their issuance of 20-year treasuries for the first time as they laid out a plan to finance a deficit for the federal government that should reach $1 trillion annually over the next 10 years, is according to independent analyses. The question is, does it matter? And this has been a subject of huge debate. Joining us now to weigh in, Chris Edwards, Director of Tax Policy Studies at the Cato Institute and editor of downsizinggovernment.org. Chris, you have come out with some pretty stark warnings about the federal deficit. Can we just start about why a federal deficit is so problematic? A lot of people challenging that concept in an era where there is an encouragement for more fiscal stimulus.
Well,
Well, what the federal government is doing right now is completely unique in our two centuries of history. In the past, we've had spikes in federal government debt, usually during wars, the Civil War and World War I and World War II. But the government has always paid the debt back down again. Now we are not at war. We're in the 11th year of economic expansion. Now we should be paying down our debt, but our debt is the highest in our peacetime history, and it is going up. The latest Congressional Budget Office data shows that the annual deficit is going from $1 trillion this year to $1.7 trillion 10 years from now. And I think that's optimistic. For one thing, the CBO doesn't put any recessions in its projections. And yet we probably will have a recession in coming years sometime, and that'll blow an even bigger hole. So I think the outlook is very scary.
Chris, are you surprised that the Republican Party hasn't made this bigger of an issue and really tried to work harder to shrink the size of government to deal with this deficit?
It is remarkable. There's been huge responsibility on both sides. The Republicans, they just want to cut taxes, which increases deficits. The Democrats and the Republicans want to increase spending. So we've got this situation where there's irresponsibility on all sides. What's remarkable is if you go back and you look at the federal budget documents of, say, President Reagan or President Clinton, there's a lot of concern about deficits. There was a focus on, creating new mechanisms to try to reduce debt and deficits. That has all gone out the window. And I think what has happened is pretty clear that we have global capital markets these days, and the U.S. government is able to borrow at very low interest rates, and politicians don't have any fears about the debt. It used to be that politicians thought if they ran big deficits, it would push up mortgage interest rates, it would cause inflation, and it would create political pain for them. But I think all the political pain is gone, and so their natural spending instincts have come out, and they're irresponsible.
Chris, but to that exact point, they have blown up the deficit, and it hasn't mattered. In fact, we just got a read today that mortgage rates in the United States have fallen to their lowest since 2016. So why is it a problem to have a big deficit?
The first problem is that all this borrowing is cost pushed to the future. The pain doesn't come now. The government borrows another $1 billion or $10 billion or $100 billion. That is all a cost on the next generation of young taxpayers. Taxes will have to be higher, $20 trillion in the future, because we've got this giant $20 trillion debt now. So it means that, and as you know, just somewhat a bit less than half of all our debt is borrowed from abroad. So that means that young American workers in coming decades will be working. Their taxes will be going to Washington, siphoned off from them and paid to foreign creditors. So they're going to be working, and we're not even going to get the benefit of that work here in the U.S. economy. So that's where the rubber hits the road. The cost is on the future.
So, Chris, in hindsight, a little bit of hindsight here, with the 2017 tax cuts a mistake from an economic perspective?
I think that the corporate tax cut was absolutely needed. We have to be globally competitive on our corporate tax rate. The individual tax cuts, I think, were much more of a mixed bag. As you know, the individual tax cuts expire at the end of 2025. And I think there's going to be, and there should be, a good debate at that time whether they're worth extending. Because if Congress keeps spending money like this, those individual tax cuts, in a way, they're not really tax cuts. All they're doing is deferring a giant tax burden that's going to come in the future anyway.
Chris, there's also, though, an argument here that if there is some sort of fiscal stimulus ongoing, that it will continue to grow the economy enough to finance some of the tax bills that will come due later on, that the consequences of not taking action now could potentially be more detrimental to the U.S. economy than ballooning the deficit. What do you say to those arguments?
It doesn't make any sense. Look, in the 1990s under President Clinton, we had some of the strongest growth we've had over the last half century, and we balanced the budget. Clinton balanced the budget 4 years in a row, and we had strong economic growth. The idea that we're getting stimulus from the massive deficits now, it doesn't make any sense. I think what it does is it scares investors and scares businesses about the future creditworthiness of the U.S. economy. So I don't, and look, we've only got modest economic growth right now. despite this giant so-called stimulus. So I don't buy the stimulus argument.
Chris Edwards, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate your thoughts here. Chris Edwards, Director of Tax Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, also an editor of downsizinggovernment.org, based in Washington, D.C., raising the specter of how this could potentially, the federal deficit could end badly for the U.S. government and its populace.
Look, whichever way you believe, it's a really interesting debate to be having, because for a long time, to Chris's point, people did believe if you balloon the deficit, you'd end up with much higher rates, which would lead to some sort of economic slowdown in their own right. But the problem is we've seen exactly the opposite, that major developed nations have gone out there and they have ballooned their deficits and their rates have dropped. So kind of calling into question some of the old theory here and raising questions about helicopter money, et cetera. It's an interesting debate, one that will be definitely had increasingly fervently.
Yes, exactly. Just some news on Boeing, some mixed news. Stocks up 2.8%. Boeing has identified new software problem on the 737 MAX, according to the FAA. But the FAA says it now, certification of flight depends on proposals from Boeing. So some mixed news there.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are edging higher. China's cutting tariffs on $75 billion of U.S. goods in half. The action is part of terms outlined in the Phase 1 trade agreement between the two countries. LinkedIn Chief Executive Jeff Weiner is stepping down, having turned the job search company into a global network for professionals and then engineered its sale to Microsoft. Weiner was CEO for 11 years and will stay on as executive chairman. Peloton said that sales in the current quarter will miss estimates. The news overshadowed the company's strong holiday earnings and optimistic projections for 2020. The maker of internet-connected exercise bikes has had a rocky few months. That included one of its ads being widely mocked on the internet. And mortgage rates declined, giving home buyers a crack at the lowest borrowing costs in more than 3 years. The average rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage, 3.45%. The 15-year average is at 2.97%. Courtney Donahoe, Bloomberg Radio.
You know your body, and you know when something's off, when something doesn't feel quite right. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, rashes, and fever. They could be signs of lupus. Listen to your body. Take care of yourself. We're here to help you take control of your health. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. The Bloomberg
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
The moment you realise you've drilled through an electric cable. The moment you realise that doesn't just mean no telly on the wall, but no telly full stop. The moment you realise you've got British Gas Home Care. And not just your electrics, but your plumbing, heating and drains are all covered. So the moment you've got a problem, make it our problem. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas Home Care.
One of these days, these boots are gonna walk all over you.
Sign up to Walk All Over Cancer with Cancer Research UK. Walk 10,000 steps every day in March and help raise money for life-saving research.
Are you ready, Boots?
It's a sunny day, perfect for walking.
Start walking.
Use the 10,000 Steps a Day Challenge to team up and bring friends and family together to help beat cancer. Come on, search Walk All Over Cancer and sign up now.
The Sky Broadband sale ends soon. Get a massive 30% off superfast broadband and anytime calls. It's now just £25 a month for 18 months, so you can stream, share, play or tweet in the living room, bedroom, hey, any room you like. It's usually £37 a month, but now it's just £25 a month for 18 months plus $19.95 setup. So what are you waiting for? Offer ends 6th of Feb. Visit sky.com today. Sky Fibre network areas. Speeds vary by location. Prices may change during contract. Terms apply.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Markets.
Coming up, we're going to take a look at a string of exits from Goldman Sachs' upper tech ranks. What does this mean about the bank's efforts to modernize some of its outfits? Plus, we're going to take a look at the rally that we're seeing in big tech with the incredible outperformance of the NASDAQ. Does this indicate froth, or is this just more of what's to come? Right now, let's head over to Greg Jarrett, Frey Bloomberg Business Flash. Greg.
Well, we have reached records. The Dow is now above a closing record, joining the NASDAQ and the S&P. They touched these all-time highs as China's plans for tariff cuts on American imports and a spate of positive earnings reports overshadowed concern about the coronavirus. Andrew Wilson, Goldman Sachs, chairman of Global FI, tells Bloomberg the U.S. economy, as his organization sees it, is resilient.
You know, we're running at about trend, maybe a shade below trend in the U.S., but it's about trend growth. Now, it's supported by the labour market. We get payrolls, of course, tomorrow, and we've seen a pretty solid run of jobs numbers. Not spectacular, but certainly enough to keep the unemployment rate either where it is or maybe even a shade lower. So with low unemployment, wage rates running around 3%. That's perhaps been a slight disappointment here, that wage rates themselves haven't gone up as much as perhaps you would think, given how low unemployment is.
We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg Radio. S&P 500 is up 0.3%, up 10. Dow's up 0.3%, up 76, as we say, in record territory. NASDAQ also in record territory is up 0.5%, up 52. The 10 years unchanged with a yield of 1.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude's up 0.25% at 50.88 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.3% at 15.6810 per ounce. The dollar yen 109.92. The euro $1.0982, and the British pound $1.2938. Boeing engineers have discovered a new software problem on the grounded 737 MAX that must be patched before the plane can return to service, according to Federal Aviation Administrator Steve Dixon. The latest issue on the plane involves an alert designed to warn when the so-called trim system, or the back half of the horizontal stabilizer, which helps raise and lower the plane's nose, is out of whack. Right now, though, we're seeing that Boeing is up 2.8%. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, it was probably 5 years or more ago when then CEO of Goldman Sachs says that Goldman is, in fact, a technology company. I think he's referring to, obviously, the huge investments they were making in technology across their business. But what's interesting, just seems over the last several weeks, we've seen a lot of news stories out that senior executives on the technology side of Goldman Sachs have been leaving the company, wondering what that means. Is anything going on there? We welcome Allison Williams. Allison Williams covers all the investment banks for Bloomberg Intelligence down in Princeton, New Jersey. So, Allison, is there anything to make here? Is this just end of year, I got my bonus, coincidence, and now I'm moving on? Or is there something bigger here? Because the company clearly has been making big investments on technology.
So certainly the timing, as you said, supports sort of typical end of year turnover. But obviously, when employees leave, they leave for a reason, right? Be it that they're compensated or going to be compensated higher at another firm, or perhaps don't like the direction. I would say that Goldman has made it clear. To your point, they declared themselves a tech company like so many other investment banks. Technology has played an increasing role in this firm. They did host their first ever investor day, and certainly technology played a big role in that. And so I think it is clear that is part of the future. And most of the initiatives that they've been building upon really only look to be gaining more traction and sort of not less. And you would think importance in the firm. But in general, as you know, technology is not just a field that's important. It's not just a function that's important for investment banks. It's a broad field with a lot of different opportunities.
Right. Well, Allison, here, let's give some details here. Mike Blum, the former tech chief at high-frequency trading specialist KCG Holdings, told Goldman Sachs he was leaving as the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer for Electronic Trading. Ezra Nahum, he was Goldman Sachs' Chief of Engineering and Operations, left. Adam Korn, Head of Engineering. Also, Rana Yared, he invested the firm's own money in several fledgling tech ventures. These are pretty senior people. And when we talk about tech, what are the crucial tech infrastructures that big banks need to implement in order to bring themselves into the modern era and compete with the likes of, say, Citadel?
Well, I think, to your point, I think as it becomes an imperative sort of across the industry, and one of the big, areas that we're seeing, for example, fixed income electronification, and, some companies have been sort of earlier on that, are the people that are sort of involved in some of the successful efforts being pulled away as the firms like Goldman and JP Morgan are showing success and sort of, showing the benefit of investing in technology, investing into technology people. Is that just making those people more attractive to competitors as they themselves are trying to keep up?
Allison, let's shift gears a little bit. Deutsche Bank has been a long beleaguered company, long beleaguered stock. The stock was up 13% almost in German trading today. What's going on?
Yeah, so that the stock, up a lot today, up very strongly for the year, outperforming everyone. I think there's a few things. So the news today is that Capital Group has taken a position. So obviously that's helping to fuel confidence in the stock. Their position is sort of just under, another investor, Hudson Executive Capital, which I think those two investors sort of signal some optimism around the stocks from some real institutional money. What I think, from a fundamental standpoint, so I guess there's two things, right, with Deutsche Bank. There's the fundamental issue, which is that they need to improve revenue. They've done all these different strategies to try to get that, to try to make traction. I think, this year and in the most recent quarter, they're showing that they're making some progress, at least showing some stability. The other part of the issue with Deutsche Bank is the capital concern, which, we don't necessarily view that as a concern, but clearly at 0.3 times tangible book value, the market views it as a concern. And as you know, someone can look very good and sometimes things can change very quickly. But I think just due to some regulator changes, some progress that they've made with their balance sheet, also evident in the most recent quarter, sort of showing some stabilization in terms of the downside. And I think that's probably really what's helping to drive the lift.
Allison Williams, thank you so much for being with us. Allison Williams, senior analyst covering all banking sectors for us here at Bloomberg Intelligence. Just looking right now at Deutsche Bank shares, they're up more than 12% on the day. They were up somewhat more earlier, currently priced at $9.30. It's been a rough ride for Deutsche Bank shares, but today it seems to be on the upswing. Right now, let's head down to 99.1 Studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager there with world and national headlines. Nathan.
Lisa, President Trump has begun a series of victory laps following his impeachment trial in the Senate, starting at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from the White House.
As he entered the room, the president held up newspapers with oversized headlines on his acquittal. He then took an apparent swipe at Senator Mitt Romney.
I don't like people who use their faith as justification for doing what they know is wrong. My family, our great country, and your president have been put through a terrible ordeal by some very dishonest and corrupt people.
With Speaker Nancy Pelosi seated nearby, the president added that he also didn't like people who say, "I pray for you," when they know that's not so. At the White House, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
Back on Capitol Hill, Speaker Pelosi called the president's remarks inappropriate. She praised Romney for the courage of his vote and reiterated that she prays hard for the president because she says he's off track. Pelosi also took aim at the president's State of the Union address this week.
What happened instead was the president using the Congress of the United States as a backdrop for a reality show, presenting a state of mind that had no contact with reality whatsoever.
Pelosi says ripping up her copy of the speech was entirely appropriate to get people's attention. The Chinese doctor who tried to get attention about the coronavirus in Wuhan, the first one to sound the warning, has died. Li Wenliang was admitted to the hospital last month, later confirmed to have the infection. Police have reprimanded him for fear-mongering when he posted on social media about a SARS-like illness on December 30th. Global news on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/award.
Vatsal Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities.
what are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials, so taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Are you interested in At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Kansas.
Search NFL today.
Right now, instead of hearing this, you could be listening to the music that keeps you moving with TuneIn Premium. Find today's biggest songs and all of your favorites commercial-free. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
You're in a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are up for day number 4 now, hitting records as China's plans for tariff cuts on American imports and some positive earnings reports overshadowed lingering concerns about the economic hit from the coronavirus. We look at the numbers every 15 minutes throughout the trading day here on Bloomberg Radio. The S&P 500 is up 0.25%, up 9. The Dow's up 0.2%, up 47. And the Nasdaq's up 0.5%, up 47 as well. The 10-year is little changed with a yield of 1.64%. West Texas Intermediate crude oil is up 0.2% at $50.84 a barrel. COMEX gold's up 0.3% at $15.6760 an ounce. The dollar yen 109.93. The euro's $1.978, and the British pound $1.29.33. Bed in a box seller Casper Sleep rose in its trading debut after a $100 million initial public offering priced at the bottom of a reduced range. Shares of Casper were up as much as 28% at one point. Right now, up 26.9% at $15.24 a share. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. I'm Greg Jarrett.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Tech shares absolutely surging after better than expected earnings from a lot of the giants. Plus, looking at the trajectory forward, that they are the future. Big question, could the coronavirus and the spread there disrupt supply chains enough to make a material dent for these companies? And just how much good news has already been priced in without perhaps that good news actually happening? Brad Stone joining us here in our Interactive Broker Studios. We're so glad to have you here in New York. Normally it's in San Francisco. Senior Executive Editor of Global Tech for Bloomberg News. Brad, let's just start with what we've seen in terms of the supply chain challenges stemming from the coronavirus for big tech. We've heard from Apple. What else are we hearing with chips, with other areas?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. Well, I mean, I think there's a lot of ambiguity. There's a lot of concern and doubt. I mean, just like the World Health Organization, is saying it doesn't quite know, how this virus operates, how it started, whether we're at peak infection. The tech companies don't know what's coming, and so we've seen a lot of the big suppliers kind of warn. Not much concrete evidence yet. So Foxconn, right, the maker of the iPhone, saying it expects 1 to 3% growth instead of 3 to 5. Qualcomm warning that it could be materially impacted. We've seen LG Electronics withdraw from the big Mobile World Congress trade show in Barcelona. So if you're a tech company with exposure, if your supply chain is in China, you're watching it, and it's sort of up in the air what the impact's going to be and whether it'll impact global demand.
So, Brad, you and the technology team out on the West Coast to cover this so well, thinking about all the supply chain of global technology. First, we had the trade uncertainty, which I guess still is there between the U.S. and China despite the phase 1 deal. Now we've got this virus. A lot of times companies have been talking about trying to de-emphasize or take some of their supply chain out of China and maybe move it to Vietnam or other areas in Asia. Is there any evidence that they're going to follow through with that, or that they can actually do that to move the needle?
I mean, I think they will follow through, but that's such a long-term process, right? And you've got 30 years of the supply chain consolidating in China, in particular in areas of China like Shenzhen, and it's not going to happen anytime soon. And some of the politically motivated promises, like Foxconn saying it's going to build a facility in Wisconsin, that's been a little more hype than reality. So none of these companies can adjust fast enough to contend with what's happening now in China.
So you talked about some of the supply chain challenges, and yet we're looking at the NASDAQ up 6.6%. We're looking at a FANG Plus index having its biggest run and the most valuation relative to the S&P, I think, in history. I mean, we're looking at some pretty extreme valuations. When you talk to people, is there a sense that there's too much good news baked in?
No, I think it's really driven by the kind of consolidation of tech into a few companies, and like you have the virus and you have the regulatory overhang, and yet, right, Apple, blockbuster iPhone sales, the stock near an all-time high. Amazon, the reacceleration of the cloud business, despite all the fear and uncertainty around, like Microsoft, winning the Jedi contract and whether Amazon's cloud growth was slowing down, and a reacceleration in retail, right? More people becoming Prime members. And so, yeah, you're right, it seems oversold. I mean, and of course you have examples where that is true, like Tesla, right? Overbought. And yet, when you look at the performance of these companies, despite the sort of bad news and the regulatory concerns, they're still doing really well.
All right. So can that enthusiasm translate and spill back over to the unicorn world, which had some of its shine taken off at the end of last year after a couple of less than happy IPO situations?
That's right. No, and then we're sort of into a different discussion, right? Because when you look at the companies that went public last year, Uber and Peloton, and then of course WeWork, which didn't even make it out, you had a situation where the hype did collide with reality, and a lot of the value was taken out already by private equity, by SoftBank, by the venture capital firms. So, there you have a situation where you've got companies like Airbnb or the fintech company Robinhood, which are probably looking at this market with a lot of anxiety, wondering, and Casper, the mattress company, of course, today, how are the public markets going to react, particularly if they remain unprofitable?
So one of the issues that has kind of crept into the technology discussion over the last year or two has been regulatory overhang. Now, historically, the U.S. government's taken, I think, a pretty light touch to the U.S. tech industry, but that might be changing. What's the feeling in the Valley there? Is this a paradigm shift, and they got to really start thinking about this?
I think that's right, Paul. I mean, storm clouds, right? It's coming at them from all angles. You've got the EU, which is obviously the most active over the last few years. But then in the U.S., the Justice Department seeming to increase the pace of its investigation, particularly of Google, and particularly with regards to its third-party ad network. We've reported, and the Wall Street Journal has reported, that they're interviewing publishers, looking at Google's ad dominance. Then you've got the FTC, you've got attorneys general, you've got David Cicciolini, the House member from Rhode Island, leading these panel discussions looking at big tech. And so, yeah, I think we're sort of at peak, or we're close to peak, scrutiny of the big tech companies, and we're just getting started there. And that does seem to be the one thing that all the presidential candidates kind of agree on.
Right now, market's basically saying it doesn't look like those politicians are going to move soon on anything, and it seems like tech companies believe that as well. Is there any sign whatsoever that they're wrong, that there is some kind of push to get some regulation passed in the near term?
I think I don't think they're wrong. I think this is a long-term process, and we saw it with the Microsoft case in the 90s. It takes years. It's appealed. The Supreme Court often has to get into these things. But, when we saw Makan Del-Rahim, the head of the DOJ antitrust division, recuse himself from the Google investigation, there are signs that things are accelerating, and he was involved in the sale of DoubleClick to Google, so it's one reason why you'd want to step back. But things like that, suggest that we're no longer in the realm of the hypothetical. It might take a long time, but these companies are girding for battle.
Brad Stone, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate you coming into our Bloomberg 1130 studios, usually based in San Francisco. Brad's Senior Executive Editor of Global Technology for Bloomberg News. He and his team do a great job covering everything on the tech space. They've been very busy with all these IPOs and all these big issues affecting big tech. I want to issue a little bit of a correction from something that was said yesterday. We had Porter Bibb on from Media Tech Partners talking about Quibi, the new streaming service. I think Porter may have said that it was a free app, but it's actually an app that has a subscription of $4.99 with ads, and without ads, the subscription is $7.99. So I just want to clear that up a little bit, but still a lot more competition coming into the streaming business.
Indeed, and the idea of the fact that young people have no attention span, and so a 10-minute series work for them seems to make sense. I will say, in all full disclosure, it's not just young people.
Exactly.
Sometimes with so much information getting thrown at you, it can be hard to focus for a long time. Looking right now at the NASDAQ, just to sort of give you some sense, up 6.6% year to date.
Yep. Looking at coming up, we're going to have President Trump's remarks. He has some comments from the White House. That'll be at 12 noon. David Wesson, Balance of Power, coming up at 12 noon. We'll carry President Trump's comments.
In addition to Bloomberg Radio, you can catch the latest news and biggest newsmakers on Bloomberg Television. Look for us on DirecTV Channel 353 or check your local listings. Sometimes the simplest...
At TUI, we're spreading sunshine early by giving away hundreds of thousands of free kids' places. So you can holiday with the little ones for less. Book today and spread the cost with £0 deposit when you pay with direct debit. From splash parks to swimming lessons. At TUI, we cross the T's, dot the I's, and put you in the middle. Direct debit on web bookings only. Free kids' places subject to limited availability. One free child place per 2 full paying adults. Booking T's and C's apply. At all protected.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing.
And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters in New York to our television and radio audiences worldwide, I'm David Weston. Welcome to Balance of Power, where the world of politics meets the world of business. President Trump is set to speak from the East Room of the White House any moment right now. We are watching that carefully. We'll bring that to you as soon as it happens. The president teased these remarks as a discussion of what he called the country's victory after the Senate voted to acquit him of 2 articles of impeachment, one for abuse of power and the other for obstruction of Congress. Joining us now with more analysis while we wait for these remarks is Bloomberg contributor Rick Davis, former presidential campaign manager for Senator John McCain. So we're waiting for the president right now. He says it's a victory for the country. I suspect this might be settling some scores, perhaps?
A little score settling today, a little sort of, pumping up for the future. Look, he had a lot at stake. It was a tough month. The Congress put him through a lot, really split vote. If it hadn't been for party line, he would have had bigger problems. Mitt Romney, the senator from Utah, the only defection from the Republican ranks, rankled him quite a bit, at which he actually brought that up at the prayer breakfast this morning. So there is a day of recriminations probably set for us.
Well, one of the things we can look forward to is the possibility he might refer to Mitt Romney, Senator Romney, actually, because he did talk about the prayer breakfast. Mitt Romney, of course, in his remarks said, I had no choice. I took an oath to God. I had to follow through, and there was no advantage for me in doing this. The president took issue with that.
Yeah, he said, don't use faith as an excuse for doing the wrong thing. Right. Anybody who voted against him is going to have been doing the wrong thing. By definition, President Trump doesn't allow any leakage of his image. He hones it very tightly. And so impeachment is going to be on his record now, for the rest of his life. And he doesn't appreciate that.
As we're watching members of the staff come into the East Wing of the White House, we'll bring you that as soon as it happens. I wonder, though, Rick, whether we might project, and we'll find out in a short time, from the State of the Union what we might see here. Because in the State of the Union, he did not really hold out much of a hand to the Democrats.
Oh, it was not a bipartisan attempt. If anything, it was sort of a State of the Union, a look back, attacking the Obama administration for their failed policies on unemployment and taxes and the economy, and taking credit for everything that's been positive in that regard. And then a look to the future campaign, not to the future of our country. And so the themes that he espoused on immigration and on health care were all things that were poll tested and ready to go for his presidential reelection.
And he was not at all shy about condemning the failed policies of his predecessor in various respects.
Oh, he went right after Barack Obama many times.
Exactly. And the socialism of American medicine, going after some of the people in that chamber at that time.
In the chamber at that time, and one of them will likely be on the ballot against him, and you can expect to hear a lot more of that.
So how much of this, what we're seeing right now, is his administration, and how much of it is the campaign? How much of this is really a campaign address?
Well, arguably, President Trump started campaigning literally the day after his inauguration, so you can't really divorce him from campaigns. It's probably what he likes to do most. And so every day of this presidency has basically been a campaign.
Yeah, I'd even suggest maybe even the day of the inauguration, because you remember the inauguration speech was so dark, so gloomy about how bad the country was. And then when we saw the State of the Union address earlier this week, it was, look at how far we've come, because it was so awful when I got inaugurated, and look where it is now.
Sure, set up the failure, right? The message is nothing is going right, and only I can fix it. That's certainly the message that he gave to everybody at the State of the Union on Tuesday.
Okay, we're going to continue to wait for the president to give his address. It was scheduled at noon. He's a couple minutes late, but while he's a couple minutes late, let's check in quickly on what's going on with the markets right now with Abigail Doolittle's. Where are we today, Abigail?
Well, we certainly have a rally once again, more modest gains than we've had earlier this week. But who knew a week ago that we would be looking at record highs for the Dow, the S&P 500, and the NASDAQ? So those coronavirus fears really are racing. And yesterday you were asking about earnings, which have been shadowed quite a bit by those macro concerns. But today, that's one of the big drivers. Twitter's up about 17%, and this is driving the communication sector higher. They put up a very strong quarter. We also have the staples sector as the second best, up about 0.6%. Philip Morris doing well. They raised their profit outlook. So today, earnings are a little bit more front and center.
And earlier in the day, it was thought that perhaps the announcement from China, they would cut those tariffs in half on, I think, $75 billion worth of goods. We're really helping the equity markets. But the bonds were also being bought. So I wonder if the bond traders have a little bit different view about the optimism than the equity traders.
Well, bonds inverse to stocks. So stocks have been in a big rally mode this week. Bonds this week have been pulling back. So a little bit of mixed movement that you see for bonds could just be some of those traders saying, wait, the stock move is huge. We've been selling off bonds right now, but maybe it makes sense to hedge a little bit. So not a lot of movement there. Yes. And that, of course, would speak to the uncertainty that we still do have around the coronavirus, even though stock investors this week choosing to look at the more optimistic view.
Yeah, the one thing we know for sure is it isn't over yet when it comes to coronavirus. We got a ways to go.
Yes, right? Lots of information probably still to come.
Okay, thanks so much to Abigail Doolittle for that check on the markets. We continue to wait now for the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to appear in the East Wing of the White House to give his remarks on what he calls a nation's victory, responding to the impeachment yesterday. So the impeachment yesterday, it was basically along party lines. You mentioned that we had the Mitt Romney thing. Did the Democrats regret having done this?
Look, Nancy Pelosi did not want to enter into an impeachment process in the House. She made it very clear throughout the entire year last year that this was not something she thought was going to end well, and she was right. It did not end well for the Democrats. They weren't able to make the case to get any real Republican softness in the vote, and so I think net, when you see some of the polls reporting that this may be the high water mark in his administration for President Trump, you have to argue that it hasn't hurt him and maybe even helped him.
Well, that's the question. Did it help him? Maybe it did, because now you can say, look, they tried me, they quitted me.
Well, there is a lot more going on than just impeachment, right? You have a very healthy economic environment that is bolstering a lot of people's way of life, and that seems to be continuing. The rally you just described has been very optimistic for people. So whether it's the bright economy that we're currently experiencing, relative peace around the world right now, there's no real conflict, foreign policy, national security has come off the front page. These things all would inure to the benefit of a sitting president We're just used to not having Donald Trump take advantage of any of these positive things, but I think he's blown through impeachment, and we'll see where he goes from here.
Okay, once again, we are waiting for President Trump, who's due to speak in the East Wing of the White House at 12 o'clock. He's somewhat delayed. Staying with me here will be Rick Davis. And a programming note now, we're going to have coverage of the New Hampshire primary. That's coming up Tuesday, starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
Revisions. Listen, we know you're not here for ads, but while you're waiting for the music, cybercriminals might be waiting for you to expose your login credentials and payment information over Wi-Fi. Help keep your online activity private with Norton 360. It gives you multiple layers of protection, including secure VPN with bank-grade encryption, device security, password manager, and PC cloud backup. Go to uk.norton.com to get all-in-one protection starting at $24.99 for your first year. Terms apply. That's uk.norton.com.
5 is in! What a run! Touchdown, Kansas City!
Congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs on winning their first Super Bowl in 50 years and second in franchise history.
50, Watkins, 10, chase to the 5, into the end zone, touchdown! That may be all she wrote!
While the NFL's 100th season may be over, football never stops on TuneIn. Search NFL Podcast to stay current with all the off-season wheeling and dealing. And get ready for the 2020 NFL Draft in April.
Go courtside with the NBA on TuneIn. With the NBA on TuneIn, hear your favorite team and players take on their biggest rivals during the biggest games throughout the year, including regular season showdowns, the 2020 All-Star Game, and the NBA Finals in June, featuring the home and away calls for all 30 teams. Plus, with the NBA on demand, relive the best moments of the season by listening to the past games in their entirety. Listen to the NBA all season long on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn. When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Kansas.
Search NFL today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
And I think he just wants to put a reference point in the history books that this was all a partisan effort on the part of the Democrats and that he actually didn't do anything wrong. So, I mean, we'll let the public decide. They got the facts. They know what's going on. But I definitely think he wants to pivot away from this and put it in his own context.
Rick, I'm curious, coming from somebody who has run so many political campaigns, there was a time, at least some people thought that the way you won a campaign is you tried to appeal to some of the people in the center, or at least toward the center, bring them over. Are those days gone? I mean, is it more a matter of just getting at your base? And if you alienate people in the center, much less the people on the other side, it doesn't bother you too much?
Well, in the old sort of strategy around politics, you went to the polls to gather up the activists and the people who are really committed in primaries and caucuses and conventions. And so you have to go a little bit more for the right in the Republican side and for the left on the Democratic side in order to get that energy from the party, win the nominations from the left and the right, and then move to the center to gravitate toward a larger coalition for the general election. These days, though, because of polarization, there are so few people who actually are undecided anymore in American politics that kind of movement from the left and the right into the center is not as popular today in politics as it was.
So what does that tell us, if anything, about the Democratic side right now? And from President Trump's point of view, does that suggest he'd rather not run against a Bernie Sanders, because if Bernie Sanders is like him in some respects, really appealing to a poll, or would he be more threatened by a Biden or a Buttigieg who might be more in the center?
You know, it's interesting. I think Trump has one thing going for him. His base is just incredibly loyal to him, right? And he thinks he can win with that base. In other words, he thinks he can drive the numbers down with the Democrats so that they don't turn out as much as he needs them to, so that he can actually use his base to win elections. That's how he won in 2016. So he really doesn't care at the end of the day who the Democrat is that he's going to run against. What he cares about is what do we have on them and how hard can we beat them down.
One thing you will not have going for him in 2020, he did in 2016, is people underestimating him. I mean, to what extent was he able to suppress some of that vote for Hillary Clinton because people were just asleep at the switch and they really didn't think he was going to get elected and they didn't come out? The Democrats this time are certainly going to make their people think, boy, you got to show up.
Yeah, he will not be underestimated again. And so I think you can see this now in the tenor of the Democrats. A lot of the primary conversation is all about electability. Who can we nominate who can beat Donald Trump or have the best chance of beating Donald Trump? And so I do think there's an awakening by the Democrats. I don't think they're going to see this moment pass again. And I think that will be seen more in the primary cycle, like in New Hampshire, than that organizational contest that we just witnessed in Iowa.
President Trump prevailed specifically in the Electoral College by a relatively small number of votes.
In the Electoral College.
Oh, that's right.
He actually got beat by Hillary Clinton.
That's right, in the popular vote. But it was a fairly small number of voters in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania. Is that a vulnerability for him? Because from the Democrat side, we say, what we really need to do is just turn around. And it was a matter of tens of thousands of votes.
Yeah, David, you're exactly right. He won 3 electoral states, 10,000, 15,000, 18,000 votes. And that is a tiny fraction of the vote compared to the overall vote in those states. The key thing that people don't really pay much attention to is that Hillary Clinton dramatically underperformed Barack Obama's previous 2 elections in those states. And even though President Trump underperformed Mitt Romney's performance in those states, he did it by such a small amount that he was able to actually beat Hillary even against the base that was much larger in the Obama elections. So if the Democrats can turn out their vote and Trump replicates the vote that he got in 2016, he doesn't stand a chance in those states.
Does the midterm election tell us anything? Or for that matter, some of the elections we've had already this year where we had some people that were typically in red states that actually elected some Democrats?
Yeah, in 2016, the president lost the popular vote by 3 million by Hillary Clinton, and we talked about that. He was able to thread the eye of the needle with electoral votes. In 2018, the midterm elections, Democrats had 9 million more votes than Republicans did. So when you start spreading the field that thin, there's going to be a highly unlikely chance that Republicans can find electoral votes by losing by 9 million or more. So the question is going to be, can the Democrats hold that coalition of voters together who overwhelmingly gave them victories in 40 different congressional seats last November and November of 18, and can they do it again this cycle?
For our television and radio audience, we are waiting for the President of the United States, Donald Trump, to appear in the East Room of the White House to give his remarks on what he calls the country's victory, by which he means his acquittal on impeachment charges. 2 articles of impeachment yesterday in the Senate. And in the meantime, we are joined here by Rick Davis, our Bloomberg contributor, somebody who's run quite a few political campaigns, including that for John McCain for president in 2008. So when you look at it that way, the way you just described, what does that tell you as a Democrat you would want in your candidate? Who's the one who's most formidable going up against Donald Trump?
I think one that excites the Democratic base, right? You've got to get those voters out. And the Democratic base is very diversified, right? You have urban liberals who are activists in a lot of these places, but you also have minorities in the rural areas. You have a lot of blue-collar workers. And so keeping that coalition together and getting them excited is going to be job number one. Then appealing to disaffected voters in the middle. Some Republicans, but many independents are wavering as to whether or not the Democrats can give me a candidate that I can support, or do I have to be forced into looking at Donald Trump for another 4 years.
So you and I were out in Des Moines and came back with no results on Monday.
It wasn't our fault, David.
I don't think it was. But they're sort of trickling in now. I think, aren't we up above 90%, something like that, get counted? Did we learn anything from that? Does that tell us anything about some of the questions you just were asking? For example, the degree to which some of these candidates could generate some real excitement, passion?
Sure. I mean, pundits were wrong, right? Everybody said it was Bernie Sanders to lose, and technically he lost it. He had, no question, a surge going on the week before the Iowa caucuses. Widely reported how much traction he was making up against Elizabeth Warren and Biden, but nobody was paying that much attention to Mayor Pete. And the reality is the guy who had the biggest surge going on was Pete Buttigieg, but the media didn't cover it. Only one poll that I know of showed him winning Iowa, and that was the morning of the Iowa caucus when it was released. So he surprised everybody with his resiliency, and I would say, look at the results. Buttigieg won all over the state, in every corner of Iowa, the east where the manufacturing is, the west where the agriculture is, the cities in the center, and no Democrat had anywhere near that level of appeal across the spectrum. And that's what I was talking about with what can appeal to Trump, is someone who has that kind of broad-based appeal.
We continue to wait for President Trump to appear at the White House to give what he says is a speech about America's victory in his success in the Senate in the trial. We're talking with Rick Davis here, our Bloomberg contributor. We have New Hampshire coming up now, and I'm very aware of momentum in New Hampshire because one year we got it wrong in the polling. Everybody got it wrong because the momentum was moving. We weren't paying attention. What do we know about New Hampshire right now?
Well, it is a momentum state. In the strange case of Iowa without any real clear outcome and even no outcome at all for 48 hours, really changed the dynamic. It's almost like you have to reload the entire Democratic primary and say, New Hampshire is going to be the start, not the second one in a series. And New Hampshire is a primary, so it's much more likely to have a lot of participants. And I would say the one thing to watch out for is New Hampshire allows independents to vote. And so some independents, they vote in Republican primaries. We certainly got a lot of support from the McCain campaign by independents. And they can vote in the Democratic primary. And this time, they'll be all voting in the Democratic primary, and they will have an inordinate impact on the outcome.
Vice President Joe Biden didn't do so well in Iowa, by all accounts. How much trouble is he in? And particularly, I've noticed the fundraising right now. We had an announcement that Sanders raised $25 million in 1 month, in the month of January. In the meantime, reportedly, Vice President Biden is pulling back on some of his advertising.
Yeah, I mean, Joe Biden did not do well in Iowa. It was a bad outcome for him, both because it was indecisive and sort of dragged on for more days than it probably would have otherwise, but also he just didn't turn out his vote. Stories are that he didn't have the organization he needed to pull off, a good outcome. New Hampshire is a little bit different. These independents, they tend to be more centrist. They go either way, Republican or Democrat sometime. That should be helpful to Joe Biden. He is in a place now where he's sitting in his campaign headquarters and saying, what do we have to do to show well now in New Hampshire? We cannot afford another bad outcome. And so we're going to see him campaigning hard this week.
Now we are hearing the applause in the East Room of the White House as President Trump is about to emerge and give his address. A real victory lap. It's been quite a week for the president after that State of the Union address, and now he is going to address the results after the acquittal of the president on 2 articles of impeachment in the Senate just yesterday. So the president is about to emerge, we're told. They put the speech up on the podium for him. They are applauding in anticipation, I believe, of the president arriving. Still has yet to come in. We should be seeing the president any moment now, I believe. We have the cabinet all assembled there, Rick, and we're waiting for those double doors to open and the president to emerge down that long, dramatic hallway. Only about 20 minutes late, Rick.
It's his house. He can show up late if he wants.
Yeah, I guess that's right. We're on his time. He's not on our time. I think that's fair to say.
I'm pretty confident it's not because he isn't sure what he wants to talk about.
There we go. Ruffles and flourishes. The doors have opened. The long, red, carpeted hallway. And we should see the President of the United States.
President of the United States.
There he is at the end of the hallway, flanked by Marine Guards walking up to the podium for the speech that I'm sure he's been looking forward to give to the American people. The President of the United States.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everybody. Wow. We've all been through a lot together, and we probably deserve that hand for all of us because it's been a very unfair situation. I invited some of our very good friends, and we have limited room, but everybody wanted to come. We kept it down to a minimum, and believe it or not, this is a minimum, but a tremendous thing was done over the last number of months, but really if you go back to it over the last number of years, we had the witch hunt. It started from the day we came down the elevator, myself and our future First Lady who's with us right now. Thank you, Melania. And it never really stopped. We've been going through this now for over 3 years. It was evil, it was corrupt, it was dirty cops, it was leakers and liars. And this should never, ever happen to another president, ever. I don't know that other presidents would have been able to take it. Some people said no, they wouldn't have. But I can tell you, at a minimum, you have to focus on this because it can get away very quickly. No matter who you have with you, it can get away very quickly. It was a disgrace. Had I not fired James Comey, who was a disaster, by the way, it's possible I wouldn't even be standing here right now. We caught him in the act. Dirty cops, bad people. If this happened to President Obama, a lot of people would have been in jail for a long time already, many, many years. I want to start by thanking some of, and I call them friends, because, you know, you develop friendships and relationships when you're in battle and war, much more so than, gee, let's have a normal situation. With all that we've gone through, we've done, I think, more than any president and administration. And really, I say, for the most part, Republican congressmen, congresswomen, and Republican senators. We've done more than any administration in the first few years. You look at all of the things we've done. I watched this morning as they tried to take credit for the stock market from think of that. Let me tell you, if we didn't win, the stock market would have crashed. And the market was going up a lot before the election because it was looking like we had a good chance to win, and then went up tremendously from the time we won the election till the time we took office, which was November 8th to January 20th. And that's our credit. That's all our credit. And leading up to that point was our credit because there was hope. And one of the reasons the stock market's gone up so much in the last few days is people think we're doing so well. They liked the State of the Union speech. It really is. It's a true honor to give it. Making the State of the Union speech, I was with some people that have been around. They've been all over the world. And one of them said, highly sophisticated person said, you know, no matter where you go in the world, it doesn't make any difference. There is nothing like what I witnessed tonight. The beauty, the majesty of the chamber, the power of the United States, the power of the people in this room. Really an amazing. I don't think there is anything like that anywhere in the world. You can go to any other country, you can go to any other location, any other place. It's the beauty of everything. It's what it represents and how it represents our country. I want to start by introducing some of the people that are here. I know some are going to be left out, but they work so hard. And this is really not a news conference. It's not a speech. It's not anything. It's just we're sort of, it's a celebration because we have something that just worked out. I mean, it worked out. We went through hell unfairly, did nothing wrong, did nothing wrong. I've done things wrong in my life, I will admit. Not purposely, but I've done things wrong. But this is what the end result is. You can take that home, honey. Maybe we'll frame it. It's the only good headline I've ever had in the Washington Post. I tell you. But every paper is the same. Does anybody have those papers? Does anybody have them? Because they're really like that, so I appreciate that. But some of the people here have been incredible warriors. They're warriors. And there's nothing from a legal standpoint. This is a political thing. And every time I say, this is unfair, let's go to court, they say, sir, you can't go to court. This is politics. And we were treated unbelievably unfairly. And you have to understand, we then went through the Mueller report. And they should have come back one day later. They didn't. They came back 2 years later, after lives were ruined, after people went bankrupt, after people lost all their money. People came to Washington to help other people. Bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I say. They came, 1 or 2 or 3 people in particular, but many people. We had a rough campaign. It was nasty. It was one of the nastiest, they say. They say Andrew Jackson was always the nastiest campaign. They actually said we topped it. It was a nasty both in the primaries and in the election. But you see, we thought after the election it would stop, but it didn't stop. It just started. And tremendous corruption. Tremendous corruption. So we had a campaign. Little did we know we were running against some very, very bad and evil people with fake dossiers, with all of these horrible, dirty cops that took these dossiers and did bad things. They knew all about it. The FISA courts should be ashamed of themselves. It's a very tough thing. And then we ended up winning on Russia. It should have taken the one day, as I said, and it took years. Then Bob Mueller testified. That didn't work out so well for the other side. But they should have said that first week, because it came out. Is that right, Jim Jordan? They knew in the first 2 days, actually. Devin, is that right? 2 days. They knew that we were totally innocent. But they kept it going, Mark. They kept it going forever. Because they wanted to inflict political pain on somebody that had just won an election that to a lot of people was surprised. I mean, we had polls that said we were going to win. We had Los Angeles Times and a few papers actually said we were going to win, but it was going to be close. And we did win. It was one of the greatest wins of all time. And they said, okay, he won. And, I wrote this down because that was where a thing called the insurance policy, to me, when I saw the insurance policy, And that was done long before the election. That was done when they thought that Hillary Clinton was going to win. And by the way, Hillary Clinton and the DNC paid for millions of dollars, the fake dossier. And now Christopher Steele admits that it's a fake because he got sued by rich people. I should have sued him too, but when you're president, people don't like suing. I want to thank my legal team, by the way, not for that advice, but for other advice. Pat, Jay, Pat, you guys stand up, please. Great job. Right at the beginning, they said, sir, you have nothing to worry about. All of the facts are on your side. I said, you don't understand. That doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And that was really true. They made up facts. A corrupt politician named Adam Schiff made up my statement to the Ukrainian president. He brought it out of thin air. Just made it up. They say he's a screenwriter, a failed screenwriter. He tried to go into, unfortunately, he went into politics after that. Remember, he said the statement, which is a mob statement, don't call me, I'll call you. I didn't say that. Fortunately, for all of us here today and for our country, we had transcripts. We had transcribers, professional transcribers. Then they said, oh, well, maybe the transcription is not correct. But Lieutenant Colonel Vidbin and his twin brother, right? We had some people that really amazing. But we did everything. We said, what's wrong with it? Well, they didn't add this word or that. It didn't matter. I said, add it. They're probably wrong, but add it. So now everyone agrees that they were perfectly accurate. When you read those transcripts, Tim Scott, I don't know if Tim's here, but he said, sir, he's the first one to call me. Sir, I read the transcript. You did nothing wrong. And Mitch, he stayed there right from the beginning. He never changed. And Mitch McConnell, I want to tell you, you did a fantastic job. Somebody said, you know, Mitch is quiet. And I said, he's not quiet. He's not quiet. He doesn't want people to know him. And they said, is Mitch smart? I said, well, let's put it this way. For many, many years, a lot of very smart, bad in many cases, sometimes good, but people have been trying to take his place. And to the best of my knowledge, I've never even heard the subject come up because they've been wiped out so fast. This guy is great, and I appreciate it, Mitch. And he's also given us 191 now. 191 federal judges, 2 Supreme Court judges, right? We're up to 191. Yeah. Great guy. Great guy. He's a tough guy to read. I'm good at reading people. Tough guy to read, I'd call him. My wife would say, how'd you do with Mitch? I don't know. That's what makes him good, when you can read somebody. Fantastic job. And he understood right from this was crooked politics. This was crooked politics. How about all these people? They're running for office. They're saying the worst things about me, like 8 senators on the Democrat side. Most of them got wiped out. You know, they got their 1% or less. Most of them got less. They decided to go home. Let's go back to California. Let's go back to wherever they came from. Let's go back to New York. How about that one? Our New York Senator, Gillibrand. Let's go back to New York after they get nothing. And then they take an oath that they will be fair, that they will be reasonable, all of the different things that they had to sign. They're not fair, but here's the beauty. So we have 4 left. They're saying the most horrendous things about me. It's okay, it's politics. And then they're supposed to vote on me. They're trying to replace me, and then they're supposed to be voting. So I think it's incredible. But so, Mitch, I want to thank you very much. Incredible. And you have some of you folks here, and they're incredible people, and they've been right from the beginning. And again, you're out of session. Unfortunately, I only told these folks, let's do this today. We did a prayer breakfast this morning, and I thought that was really good. In fact, that was so good it might wipe this out. But by the time we finish, this will wipe that one out, those statements. I had Nancy Pelosi sitting 4 seats away, and I'm saying things that a lot of people wouldn't have said, but I meant every word of it. But we have some of the folks that are going to be leaving right after this, and they work hard, and they did work hard. Bill Cassidy, Senator. Stand up, Bill. What a guy. Great man. When I need to know about health insurance and pre-existing conditions and individual mandates, I call Bill, or I call Barrasso. We get those two guys, they know more than anybody. A man who just became a senator. He's a little bit like me. We have a couple of them. Very successful guy in business, and he said, what the hell? I'll run for the Senate from Indiana. And he ran, and I saw him on television destroying his opponent in a debate. I said, this guy could win, and I got behind him. And Mike Braun, you have done some great job. Thank you very much. Tough. Thank you. A man who got James Comey to choke, and he was just talking in his regular voice. He's the roughest man. He's actually unbelievable, and I appreciate the letter you sent me today. I just got it. But he's got this voice that scares people. People from Iowa can be very tough. We're doing very well in Iowa. But I'll tell you, Chuck Grassley, he's looking at Comey. Well, you tell me, what did you say? Now, he wasn't being rough. That was just the way he talked. And that was when Comey announced that he was leaking, lying, and everything else, right? He choked because he never heard anybody talk like that. You should have gone, I wish you got angry. You could have gotten the whole ball game. He would have said, I give up. Chuck Grassley is an incredible guy. And a man who, he was running against a tough, smart campaigner. We learned out how good she was, right? She was a great campaigner. In fact, by the end of the campaign, I thought she was more for me than you were, Josh. I was worried. I saw her ads. She was saying the greatest things about me. And you know who I'm talking about? And I went to a great place, Missouri, and I said, who do you have to beat her? And they said, well, we have 4 people. I said, let me see them. I got to interview people. Can you imagine? I'm interviewing people for the United States Senate. This is what I do. Where have I gone? But I love it. I love it because we're getting great people. The first one I met was Josh Hawley. After about 10 minutes, I said to the people, don't show me anybody else. This is the guy. He was the Attorney General, did a phenomenal job in the state, highly respected, and Claire McCaskill. So the theory was you couldn't beat her. Great campaigner. Remember the last campaign? She was always going to be taken out, and she wins, and people say, how did that happen? Didn't happen with him. But she got so friendly toward me. In fact, one of the ads I still have, I'm putting it in the archives as one of the best ads I've ever made. And she tried to convince people that we were best friends. But Josh ended up winning by 5 or 6 points. You were unbelievable. You were tough. And you are something. And one of the greatest supporters on the impeachment hoax was
We have been listening to President Donald Trump speaking from the East Room in the White House. He continues to speak. This is a speech that he scheduled after his acquittal in the Senate yesterday. It was a wide-ranging speech, I think it's fair to say, starting back to when he came down the escalator with Melania Trump when he announced he first ran for president. He said that people were after him from the beginning and right through. He described it as corrupt, what was done to him. It was evil and involved dirty cops. He also took a shot or two at Mr. Comey. He said that if Mr. Comey had not been fired, probably President Trump would no longer be president, is what he said. I wouldn't be standing here any longer. He also talked about Bob Mueller in a disparaging way, but basically said we have been vindicated, they have been evil, they've been corrupt on the other side, and essentially justice has triumphed. So, Rick, as I say, it's a fairly wide-ranging speech. Unlike the State of the Union, it doesn't seem like he's on the teleprompter. This is sort of unplugged, as it were.
Yeah, it's a little stream of consciousness, thanking people in the audience, taking shots at his foes, both in his own administration and outside. Now he's going through congressional races that he weighed into, back in 18. It's not totally clear what he's trying to accomplish other than sort of have a fun time and take a victory lap on his impeachment.
Yeah, well, we'll continue to monitor this, and if there's news being made, we'll bring it to you. But in the meantime, there was other news that broke while we were listening to President Trump, and it is Tom Perez, the head of the Democratic National Committee, has now tweeted out that he wants a recanvass in Iowa. I'm not sure exactly what that means. They're still counting, I think, and recounting. But he now says, let's go back to scratch because there's enough questions about it. What do you make of that?
Well, it would be a disaster if they actually went back and relitigated the Iowa caucus. Let's chalk it up to a failed attempt at democracy in Iowa, and the candidates themselves, the last thing they're going to want to do is go spend one more day in Iowa. So Perez, I don't know, maybe he's a secret weapon for Donald Trump in the Democratic Party, but if there's anything that he should be doing is resigning from his post as chairman of the DNC. His rules were what put into effect some of the spiraling out of control caucuses that we witnessed.
So this is an important point. People tend to blame the Iowa Democratic Party. It wasn't just them that came up with these rules and this approach.
Well, the way the Democratic Party works is the National Party sets the rules of delegate selection in states, all states. And so every single rule that was applied to these caucuses in Iowa that were all brand new this cycle were approved of and promoted by Chairman Perez. So maybe this is his way of, shirking culpability. But if I were a Democrat running for president right now, my response to his suggestion to relitigate the Iowa caucuses is maybe you should go and clean up your mess there and then resign from chairmanship.
Okay, thank you so much to Rick Davis, our Bloomberg contributor. We'll continue to monitor the president's remarks as they occur. Rick Davis, I'm happy to say, will be with us in New Hampshire for coverage of the primary that's coming up next Tuesday. Meanwhile, in other news, the city of Wuhan is telling residents to begin reporting their body temperature daily as the death toll from the coronavirus continues to rise, with over 500 people dead and over 26,000 cases in mainland China. Welcome now Dr. Jennifer Nuto. She is senior scholar and associate professor at the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security in Baltimore. So, Doctor, thank you for being back with us. Really appreciate it. Give us your take right now on where this viral epidemic stands.
Well, we continue to see a steep climb in cases every day. Those are the reported cases. It's not necessarily the days that the cases occurred. But with this continued increase, despite very aggressive measures being taken in China and now outside of China, I think we really have to ask the question, is it going to be possible to contain this virus, or is this going to be something that circulates similar to, a pandemic influenza?
Well, let's talk about that, Doctor, because obviously for those of us particularly who are not doctors and don't know the science, we can overreact. I suppose we can underreact as well. One of the things I heard today was actually the lethality rate, the mortality rate for coronavirus right now roughly tracks that of the Spanish influenza back in the early part of the 20th century. Now, obviously, that was a very different situation. It was much more broadly based around the world. But is that true?
Yeah, so if you just took the number of cases and the number of deaths and you divided the deaths into the cases, you would get that 2%. But it's not really an accurate way to look at lethality because it's possible that there are many, many more cases out there that we're just not counting, particularly mild cases. So my best guess is that the mortality is actually lower and perhaps much lower than that 2%. When I brought up the pandemic influenza, I just want to say that when we talk about pandemics, we do so with respect to geography. So meaning that the virus is capable of spreading around the globe, and that's not necessarily an indication of its severity. I know the word pandemic can sound scary, but really, when we talk about it in the epidemiologic sense, it's about how quickly it's spreading and where it's spreading.
So from your point of view, are the authorities both in China and the United States doing what ought to be done? Are they doing what they can do at this point?
Well, I think that you've seen a lot of aggressive measures being taken, and yet still the virus continues to circulate. And for me, that's not entirely surprising because respiratory viruses like this do spread very quickly. And I think it's time for us to reconsider what our approach is going to be and examine whether it's going to be possible to fully stop the spread of this. I mean, we also have to consider how disruptive these measures are. You mentioned that the city of Wuhan is going to be measuring everybody's body temperature. I don't even know how they'll be able to act on those data. People have fevers for all sorts of things. I think at some point we have to re-examine our approach. And in my view, I think we're going to have to shift from these very drastic efforts that don't seem to be helping, I think in many ways are probably hurting, and shift to a situation where we're focused on just reducing the spread and protecting those people who are most at risk of becoming severely ill and dying. And although we see the large numbers of deaths being reported, and that's a concern, we also have to examine that the majority of the deaths so far seem to be in people who have some underlying health condition or are otherwise known to be at risk for severe complications with an infection, a respiratory viral infection.
We're talking with Dr. Jennifer Nuzzo of Johns Hopkins. Doctor, I've seen some reporting that suggests that the incidence of these epidemics, if not pandemics, is increasing. They're coming up with increasing frequency. We all remember SARS, but we've also had a number of others. Is that true? And if so, what's causing that?
Yes, it is true. There have been some studies that have looked at these emerging infectious disease events, and those are pathogens that we haven't recognized before, and that they go on to cause outbreaks, and then if they're not contained, epidemics. And there does seem to be a clear line that they are increasing. Clearly, surveillance for these events has gotten better, but some studies that have looked at this, even when they kind of try to adjust for increases in surveillance, still see that there's an increase. And I think there are a number of important drivers of this. One is that we are a very populous globe, and we are a very connected globe. And so now you can get on a plane and be anywhere in the world in 36 hours, and that wasn't always the case. We're also a globe that is changing our environment in ways that favor the emergence and spread of viruses. So deforestation happening in many countries, allowing people to encounter wildlife populations that they didn't encounter before. Climate is changing and likely moving pathogens into places they hadn't been before. So there are a lot of environmental factors as well that can favor the emergence of these viruses. And when you layer that on top of the fact that we're very interconnected, that there's mass displacement in the world, so people are moving in ways that they haven't moved before, that all creates the condition for not only the emergence of new virus, but the rapid spread of them.
Okay, Doctor, thank you so very much for your patience as well as for your time today. Really appreciate it. That's Dr. Jennifer Nuzzo of Johns Hopkins. And we need to note that the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg. He is founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. And now let's stay with China, but this time talking about trade. There's news today that China will cut in half its tariffs on $75 billion of U.S. imports as of February 14. That is part of its Phase 1 trade agreement with the United States, something that President Trump touted as a step forward in his State of the Union address on Tuesday. So this is something that had been expected, widely expected. I guess the good news here is that China will go forward despite the problems that they're having with the coronavirus and the spread of it. They will go forward and comply with what they promised under the Phase 1 agreement. Surprisingly, actually, for some at least, the equity markets in the United States and around the world reacted positively to this news about the trade from China, apparently saying this is a good thing, maybe we'll get growth going despite what's going on the coronavirus. And I think it's fair to say, actually, if you look at equity markets, although they did take a big hit, of course, initially from the coronavirus, they seem to be rebounding. There seems to be an assumption that it is contained and it will not last too long. On the other hand, the bond markets have also been selling off, but now they are coming back. And we welcome now an authority on global trade. He is Pascal Lamy. He served for 2 terms as Director General of the World Trade Organization after leading the trade policy for the European Union as its Commissioner for Trade, and he comes to us today from Brussels. So, Mr. Lamy, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it. Let's start with the U.S.-China relationship. As I say, the China says they're going to cut their tariffs, which is a step forward. The President Trump has really pursued a bilateral approach to trade. It almost has replaced what we had since World War II. How do you assess the effectiveness of President Trump in the trade arena?
Well, as a trade expert and not on a political ground, my own view, for what it's worth, is that Trump's trade policy do not work. Imposing tariffs on imports, which is what he believes he should do in order to reduce the U.S. trade deficit, which he believes is the problem, is all wrong. A, because the U.S. trade deficit is not the problem. When you have the dollar as a currency, you don't have a problem with your trade deficit. And second, because this will not reduce the U.S. trade deficit, especially if he imposes tariffs on China. What is produced in China and imported by the U.S. will be produced elsewhere, mostly outside the U.S., and the price for tariffs is being paid by U.S. consumers, and this is a negative development for the U.S. economy. So overall, I don't think it works. I think it's already showing that it doesn't work, and the fact that China has given a $200 billion present to President Trump for his re-election campaign will not change that.
Staying with China for a moment, Mr. Lamy, how do you assess the possible effects on global trade of the coronavirus?
I mean, there's one thing where I agree with Trump on trade, which is that the rules of international trade, the disciplines of the World Trade Organization, do not discipline enough a number of Chinese practices, and especially on subsidization. The Chinese have too wide a margin of maneuver within existing disciplines of the WTO to subsidize production, hence gain an unfair comparative advantage when you compete with them. So on this, I think there is a good US point, which, by the way, is also a point made by the EU or by Japan, that World Trade Organization needs to be reformed in order to adjust to the size and the behavior of China today. This is why the solution is in a reinforcement, in a renegotiation, in an improvement of WTO disciplines, and not in bilateral tariff wars.
We are talking with Pascal Lamy. He's former Director General of the World Trade Organization. Let's stay on the subject of the WTO, which you led for some good long time. President Trump is insisting on reforms to the WTO and has made various threats, I think I can call it, if they don't reform. Does he have a point that there is reform that is required?
As I just said, I think the US have a point, and President Trump has a point in saying that the WTO needs reform. Remember last time we tried to reform WTO, and I was the WTO DG at the time. We had a big negotiation with the WTO reform agenda, and the ones that froze this negotiation about WTO reform, including on subsidies at the time,